What happens when the most dangerous man in the city offers you everything you've ever wanted, but at a price you can never repay? Tonight, in a rain-soaked cafe where secrets drown louder than thunder, a broken young woman will sit across from the monster who destroyed her life. He'll smile. He'll know her name, and he'll make her an offer that shatters everything she thought she knew about revenge, justice, and the thin line between the two. This is a story of betrayal, power, and the kind of love that's born from ashes. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down like judgment. Lena Carter stood beneath the broken awning of Chen's cafe, watching water cascade off the torn canvas and sheets. The street beyond was a blur of neon and shadow, car lights bleeding through the downpour like wounds that wouldn't close. Her jacket, too thin for November, too worn to be anything but desperation, clung to her shoulders, and her hands shook as she checked her phone one more time. No messages, no missed calls. Just the cracked screen reflecting her own hollow eyes back at her. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, watching the cafe through the rain-streaked window. Watching him. Adrian Voss sat alone at a corner table, the kind of table that gave you a view of both entrances and kept your back to solid brick. Even from outside, even through the distortion of weather and glass, Lena could see the way other patrons avoided looking directly at him. They'd glance, then look away quickly, like he was the sun, and they were afraid of going blind. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent for the year. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it had never softened for anyone. And those eyes, even from this distance, even through the rain, she could feel the weight of them, cold, calculating, the kind of eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing. And beneath the table, almost invisible in the dim lighting, the chrome wheels of his wheelchair caught the light. Lena had spent 6 months learning everything about Adrian Voss. She knew he'd been in that chair for 3 years, since the night his own brother tried to kill him in a warehouse fire on the industrial docks. She knew he'd turned that betrayal into an empire, consolidating power while everyone thought he was weak, vulnerable. She knew he controlled everything from the shipping yards to the city council, that judges took his calls and cops looked the other way. She knew all of this because she'd made it her life's work to know. What she didn't know, what kept her frozen beneath this awning, rain soaking through her boots, was whether tonight would end with answers or with her body floating in the river. Inside the cafe, a woman approached Adrian's table. Lena straightened, her breath catching. The woman was stunning, runway model beautiful, with platinum hair styled in perfect waves and a dress that shimmered like liquid silver. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing every eye in the room was on her. When she reached Adrian's table, she didn't sit down. Lena couldn't hear the words through the glass and rain, but she could read the body language. The woman's expression shifted from apologetic to defensive to cold in the space of 30 seconds. Adrian didn't move. Didn't even look up from whatever he was reading on his phone. Just sat there, perfectly still, as the woman's voice rose loud enough that Lena could see other diners starting to stare. Then the woman did something that made Lena's heart stop. She leaned down, said something directly into Adrian's ear, something that made his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. And then she straightened up, turned on her designer heels, and walked out of the cafe without looking back. The door chimed as she left, a cheerful little sound that felt obscene against what had just happened. Adrian Voss, the man who controlled the city's underworld with an iron fist, had just been publicly dumped in a third-rate cafe. For exactly 10 seconds, the entire restaurant held its breath. Then Adrian picked up his coffee cup, took a slow sip, and went back to his phone as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just been humiliated in front of a room full of witnesses. The message was clear: this doesn't touch me. Nothing touches me. But Lena had been watching him too long, had studied every photograph and security camera footage she could get her hands on. She saw what others missed, the way his fingers tightened fractionally on the cup, the muscle that jumped in his jaw, the ice in his eyes that somehow got colder. This was it. This was her moment. If she was going to get close to him, if she was going to find out the truth about what happened 5 years ago, about the raid that killed her sister and destroyed her family, she needed to move now. While he was distracted, while his pride was wounded and his attention elsewhere. Lena pushed away from the wall and walked into the rain. The cafe door chimed again as she entered, and she kept her head down, playing the part she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Just another broke girl trying to get out of the weather. She ordered a coffee she couldn't afford from a barista who looked at her with the kind of pity that made her want to scream. When she turned from the counter, cup warming her frozen hands, she let herself glance toward Adrian's table. He was looking right at her. Not the casual glance of someone scanning the room. Not the quick assessment of a man checking out a woman who'd just walked in. This was different. This was recognition. Direct. Unflinching. A gaze that stripped away every carefully constructed layer of her disguise and saw straight down to the bones. Lena's blood turned to ice. He knows. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, they stared at each other across the cheap linoleum and scattered tables. The cafe's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Someone's phone rang. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. Then Adrian raised one hand and gestured to the empty chair across from him. Not a request. A command. Lena's first instinct was to run. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to drop the coffee, bolt for the door, and never stop running. This man had killed people for looking at him wrong. What would he do to someone who'd been investigating him for months? But then she thought of Sarah. Sweet, brilliant Sarah, who'd been studying law because she wanted to help people, who'd gotten caught in the crossfire of someone else's war. Sarah, who died choking on her own blood in an alley while Lena held her and screamed for help that never came. Lena walked to Adrian's table and sat down. Up close, he was even more striking and more terrifying. There was something about the way he held himself, utterly still, perfectly controlled, that made you aware of exactly how dangerous stillness could be, like a predator that doesn't need to show its teeth to make you remember it has them. Lena Carter, he said, and his voice was like smoke, smooth and dark and impossible to hold on to. I was wondering when you'd finally work up the courage to introduce yourself. She didn't let herself react, even though her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could see it. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Adrian tilted his head slightly, and something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. Then I suppose it's just coincidence that you've been living in the apartment directly across from my office building for the past 4 months, using a telephoto lens to photograph everyone who enters and exits, following my security detail on their rounds, breaking into my accountant's office last week. Very sloppy, by the way. You left fingerprints on the window latch. Lena's throat went dry. You're mistaken. I'm never mistaken. He leaned back slightly in his wheelchair, studying her the way a scientist might study a particularly interesting specimen. You've been investigating me since August. Started with public records, business licenses, property deeds, campaign contributions. Then you got more ambitious, hacked into my lawyer's email server, bribed a dock worker for shipping manifests, even managed to get a tracker onto one of my cars, though my people found it within 6 hours. Each word landed like a punch. Lena had been so careful. She'd covered her tracks, used VPNs and burner phones, never stayed in one place too long. How had he known? How long had he known? The question, Adrian continued, his voice never rising above that same deadly calm, is not whether you've been following me. The question is what I'm going to do about it. Lena's hand tightened on her coffee cup. Through the window, rain continued to pour down, and she wondered if anyone would even notice if she disappeared tonight. She had no family left except her mother, who barely remembered her own name anymore. No close friends. She'd burned every bridge, pushed away everyone who cared, all in service of this single obsessive goal, finding out the truth about that night, making someone pay. I want to know why, she said, and was surprised by how steady her voice came out. 5 years ago, the warehouse raid on Keller Street. I want to know why you ordered it. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Not quite surprised, but close. That's what this is about? Keller Street? My sister died there. The words came out harder than she intended. Sarah Carter, 23 years old, law student. She was just walking home from the library and got caught in the crossfire when your people shot up that warehouse. I remember, Adrian said quietly, and that shocked her more than anything, that he'd remember one civilian casualty among dozens. She wasn't the target. No, she was collateral damage. Lena leaned forward, and she didn't care anymore about playing it safe or hiding her rage. You killed her because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you've never faced any consequences. No arrest, no trial, not even a question from the police. You killed my sister and 23 other people, and you're sitting here in your expensive suit drinking coffee like none of it matters. It matters. Adrian's eyes had gone very dark. Every single one of them matters, but not in the way you think. Then tell me why she had to die. No. Lena's hand moved before she could think, reaching into her jacket pocket for the small knife she kept there. But Adrian moved faster. His hand shot across the table and caught her wrist in a grip like iron, holding it completely still. I wouldn't, he said softly. They froze like that, locked together across the table. Lena could feel how much stronger he was, even confined to a wheelchair, even with his lower body useless. His fingers were long and elegant, but there was steel beneath the skin. If he wanted to break her wrist, he could do it easily. Let me go, she whispered. In a moment. Adrian's thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling the frantic hammer of her heartbeat. First, I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in anything you have to offer. You should be, because right now you have exactly two choices. He released her wrist slowly, deliberately. The first choice is that you walk out of this cafe, get on a bus, and leave this city tonight. Don't come back. Don't try to contact anyone you know. Start over somewhere else with a new name and forget you ever heard of Adrian Voss. And the second choice? Adrian smiled, and it was the most unsettling thing she'd ever seen. Not because it was cruel, but because it was genuine. You work for me. Lena stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm always serious, especially about business. He picked up his coffee again, perfectly casual, as if he hadn't just upended her entire world. You've been investigating me for months and managed to get closer than anyone has in years. That takes talent, intelligence, dedication, all qualities I value in my organization. I'd rather die than work for you. Would you? Adrian's gaze pinned her in place. Because that's essentially what you've been doing for the past 6 months. Throwing your life away on a revenge fantasy that will never give you what you want. Your sister is gone, Lena. Nothing you do will bring her back. So the question becomes, what do you want to do with the time you have left? I want justice. Justice is a fairy tale we tell children. Adrian set down his cup with a soft click. What exists in the real world is power. And right now, you have none. You're living in a roach-infested studio, working 3 part-time jobs that barely cover rent, spending every free moment chasing a man who could erase you with a phone call. Is that the life your sister would have wanted for you? The mention of Sarah felt like a slap, and Lena had to fight to keep her voice level. Don't you dare talk about what she would have wanted. Someone needs to. Adrian leaned forward, and his eyes held hers with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Sarah Carter wanted to be a lawyer. She wanted to help people, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. So, let me ask you this. If she could see you now, destroying yourself in pursuit of revenge, would she be proud? Or would she tell you to stop wasting your life and actually do something that matters? Lena's vision blurred, and she realized with horror that she was crying. She hadn't cried since the funeral, had locked down every emotion and channeled it all into cold, focused rage. But now, sitting across from the man who'd killed her sister, hearing him speak Sarah's name in her dreams, the wall cracked. You don't get to use her against me, she said, her voice breaking. I'm not using her. I'm using the truth. Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim folder, which he slid across the table. Inside this are 2 things. First, a job offer. Position in my organization, generous salary, full benefits, and access to resources you've never dreamed of. Second, information about what really happened on Keller Street 5 years ago. Lena's hand hovered over the folder. What kind of information? The kind that will change everything you think you know. Adrian's expression was unreadable. But you only get to see it if you accept my offer. Work for me, and I'll give you the truth. Walk away, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. This is blackmail. This is business. I need someone with your skills. You need answers. We can help each other. And if I refuse? If I take option 1 and leave the city? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then I'll let you go. I don't make threats I don't intend to keep, and right now I have no intention of harming you. But Lena...
His voice dropped lower, and there was something almost like concern in it.
If you stay in this city and continue investigating me without my protection, someone will kill you, not me, but one of the many people who want me dead. You've made yourself visible, and in my world, visibility is fatal. The cafe door chimed again, and 3 men walked in. They weren't together. One headed to the counter, one grabbed a newspaper from the rack, one just stood by the door, but Lena recognized the pattern. Security. Adrian's people positioned to cover every exit. She was trapped. How long do I have to decide? She asked. You already have. Adrian nodded toward the folder. You picked it up. Lena looked down and realized he was right. Her fingers were touching the manila edge, pulling it toward her across the scarred table. Some part of her, the part that had been screaming for answers for 5 years, had already made the choice. She opened the folder. The first page was a contract, standard employment agreement with a salary that made her eyes widen. The second page was a black and white photograph. It showed a man she'd never seen before. Late 40s, graying hair, expensive suit. He was standing outside a warehouse, the warehouse on Keller Street, talking on a phone. The timestamp said 9:47 p.m., approximately 30 minutes before the raid. Who is this? Lena asked. Victor Hale, my most trusted lieutenant. Adrian's voice had gone cold. And the man who ordered the raid that killed your sister. Lena's head snapped up. What? I didn't order the Keller Street raid. Victor did. Unauthorized, unsanctioned, and catastrophically sloppy. He claimed it was necessary to eliminate a rival gang's weapons cache, but the intelligence was wrong. The warehouse was empty except for homeless squatters and people cutting through the alley. 24 civilians dead, including your sister, because Victor was too arrogant to verify his information. You're lying. But even as she said it, Lena could see the truth in the photograph, could see the timeline that didn't quite add up in the official report she'd read. If he went rogue, why haven't you punished him? Because I can't prove it. Not yet. Adrian's fingers drummed once on the armrest of his wheelchair. Victor is very good at covering his tracks. He made it look like my order, my operation. Everyone in the organization believes I authorized Keller Street, which means if I move against him without proof, I'll look weak, vindictive, like I'm eliminating rivals instead of maintaining order. So you've known for 5 years that someone in your organization murdered 24 people, and you've done nothing? I've been gathering evidence, building a case that can't be disputed, and now, Adrian gestured to her, you're going to help me finish it. Lena's mind was reeling. Everything she thought she knew, every assumption she'd built her life around was shattering. Why should I believe you? Why should I believe any of this? Because I'm the only one who's been honest with you tonight. Adrian pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and turned it to show her a video. This is security footage from the night your sister died. Watch. The video showed the alley behind the Keller Street warehouse from a high angle. Lena watched herself, younger, more innocent, walking home from visiting Sarah at the library. She saw Sarah emerge from the side door calling her name, saw herself turn and smile. Then the van screeched around the corner, and men with guns poured out. Lena had seen this moment 1,000 times in her nightmares, but never from this angle, never from outside her own terror. She watched herself dive behind a dumpster, watched Sarah freeze in the middle of the alley, trapped. And then she saw something she'd never seen before. A figure emerged from the shadows behind Sarah, moving fast, low to the ground. The wheelchair was barely visible in the darkness, but the person in it was unmistakable. Adrian Voss, 3 years younger but still recognizable, rolling forward with desperate speed. He reached Sarah just as the first shots rang out. In the video, Adrian grabbed Sarah's arm and yanked her down behind a parked car. Lena saw him cover her sister's body with his own, saw the bullets tear into the car's metal frame instead of into Sarah's flesh, saw him pull a phone from his jacket and shout into it. The shooting lasted 47 seconds. When it ended, Adrian rolled backward, and Lena could see Sarah standing up, shaking but alive, staring at the man who just saved her life. Then Sarah did something that made Lena's heart stop. She looked toward where Lena was hiding, toward the dumpster, and started to run, away from safety, toward her sister. No, Lena whispered, even though she knew how this ended. No, Sarah, don't. In the video, Adrian grabbed for Sarah's jacket,
trying to hold her back, but she was already moving, already running into the open where the second van was screeching around the corner, where the men who'd missed their first chance were coming back for another shot. Lena watched her sister die. She'd been there that night, hiding, frozen in terror. But she'd never seen it from outside. Never seen how Sarah could have survived if she hadn't run. If she hadn't tried to save her little sister instead of saving herself. The video stopped. Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The cafe around her felt far away, like she was watching it through thick glass. "I was there investigating Victor's operation," Adrian said quietly. "I got a tip that something was wrong, that the intelligence didn't match our usual standards. I went to stop it, but I was too late. The raid was already underway." He paused. "I managed to save 3 people that night. Your sister should have been one of them." "She was trying to save me." Lena's voice sounded hollow, distant. "I was hiding, and she loved you more than she feared death." Adrian's expression held something that might have been respect. "That kind of love is rare, worth remembering." "You saved her." Lena looked up, meeting his eyes. "Even if just for a moment, you saved her." "Not well enough." They sat in silence while the rain hammered against the windows. Somewhere in the cafe someone laughed, an obscene sound against the weight of what Lena had just learned. "Victor Hale," she said finally. "He's the one I should be hunting." "Yes, but you can't touch him alone. He has resources, protection, people loyal to him personally rather than to the organization. If you go after him directly, you'll end up dead in a ditch." Adrian pushed the contract closer. "Work for me, and I'll give you access to everything. Files, surveillance, contacts. Together, we can prove what he did. Bring him down, get your justice. And what do you get out of this? A traitor removed from my organization, someone competent to fill his position. And Adrian's expression shifted, became something harder to read. "Perhaps a way to balance the scales. I couldn't save Sarah, but I can help her sister survive. That's not redemption, but it's something." Lena looked down at the contract, at Sarah's death, at 5 years of rage and grief and obsessive pursuit that had led her to this moment, this choice, this impossible man offering her an impossible deal. "If I do this," she said slowly, "and we find proof that Victor Hale ordered the Keller Street raid, what happens to him?" "Justice. Real justice, not the kind you'd get from the legal system. He'll answer for every life he took." "Including Sarah's?" "Especially Sarah's." Lena picked up the pen that was clipped to the folder. "There's no going back from this," Adrian warned. "Once you sign that contract, you're mine. My organization, my rules, my world. You'll see things that will change you. Do things you can't undo. Are you prepared for that?" Lena thought of Sarah, thought of her sister's face the last time she'd seen her alive, laughing about something stupid, her whole brilliant future stretching out ahead of her. Thought of that future cut down in an alley while Lena hid and did nothing. She thought of 5 years spent dying slowly, piece by piece, in pursuit of a revenge that would never satisfy the emptiness inside her. And she thought of what Sarah would say, if she could speak. Would she want Lena to waste her life on hatred? Or would she want her sister to live, to fight, to actually change something instead of just destroying herself? Lena signed the contract. Adrian took it from her, glanced at the signature, and nodded. "Welcome to my organization, Miss Carter. We start tomorrow morning." "What do I do until then?" "Go home. Pack what you can't leave behind. Tomorrow, you move into a secure apartment, one of my properties. Your old life ends tonight." He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "This is my personal number. If you need anything, call. If you're in danger, call immediately." Lena took the card, feeling the weight of what she'd just done settling over her shoulders. "I still hate you." "I know, but hate is useful, if properly directed." Adrian's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Pointed at Victor Hale, and we'll accomplish great things together." "And after? When he's gone and justice is served, what then?" "Then you decide if you want to stay in my world or leave it." Adrian's eyes held hers. "I don't keep people who don't want to be kept." The cafe door chimed, and Lena looked up to see the security team beginning to move. Whatever private moment this had been, it was ending. Adrian's people were closing in, establishing a perimeter, preparing to escort their boss out into the rain. Lena stood up, and Adrian rolled back slightly to give her room. "One more thing," she said. "Why didn't you just kill me? When you found out I was investigating you, why go through all of this instead of making me disappear?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression was almost sad. "Because I've spent 3 years in this chair learning that strength isn't about who you can destroy. It's about who you choose to save." He nodded toward the door. "Go home, Lena. Tomorrow, everything changes." Lena walked out of the cafe into the rain. It had lessened to a steady drizzle, cold and cleansing, washing away the girl who'd walked in and leaving someone new in her place. She could feel Adrian's business card in her pocket, burning like a brand. She'd made a deal with the devil. She'd betrayed everything she'd believed for 5 years. She'd joined the organization responsible for her sister's death. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like the first right choice she'd made since Sarah died. Behind her, through the cafe window, she could see Adrian on his phone, already moving on to the next crisis, the next decision, the next move in whatever vast game he was playing. He didn't look back at her, didn't watch her leave. She was already part of his world now, already a piece on his board. Lena pulled her jacket tighter and started walking. She had a long night ahead, packing, planning, preparing for a future she couldn't begin to imagine. But for the first time in 5 years, she felt something other than rage burning in her chest. She felt purpose. Adrian Voss had given her a target, resources, and a path to the truth. Whether he was the monster she'd believed him to be or something more complicated, she'd find out soon enough. But right now, she had a name. Victor Hale, the real killer. The man who'd destroyed her family and walked away clean. Not for much longer. Lena disappeared into the rain-soaked streets, leaving behind the girl who'd walked into that cafe and embracing whatever dark future waited ahead. The contract was signed. The choice was made. Tomorrow, she would enter Adrian Voss's empire, and together they would make someone pay for Sarah's death. The rain kept falling, washing the city clean, and somewhere in the darkness, Victor Hale slept peacefully, unaware that his past was finally catching up to him. Justice was coming. And it had Lena Carter's name on it. The apartment was nothing like Lena expected. She'd imagined something cold and sterile, a holding pen designed to keep assets contained and compliant. Instead, the car dropped her off in front of a renovated brownstone in the historic district, the kind of building with actual character, where morning light would filter through tall windows and the hardwood floors still held the warmth of a century's worth of footsteps. The driver, a silent man named Marcus, who'd picked her up at dawn, handed her a key card and pointed to the 3rd floor. Then he drove away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with 2 duffel bags containing everything she owned. Inside, the apartment was furnished but not decorated. Clean lines, quality pieces, everything perfectly functional and utterly impersonal. A blank slate. The kind of space that could become whatever its occupant needed it to be. Lena dropped her bags by the door and walked to the window. The view overlooked a small park where early morning joggers traced paths through the frost-touched grass. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that 3 blocks away, a crime empire operated out of a converted textile factory. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she knew who it was. "Settle in?" Adrian's voice was crisp, businesslike. No trace of the man who'd sat across from her in that cafe, talking about her dead sister with something almost like compassion. "The apartment's fine." "Good. Car picks you up at 8. Don't be late." He hung up before she could respond. Lena stared at the phone, then at the bags she hadn't unpacked, then at the clock showing 6:47 a.m. She had 73 minutes to transform from Lena Carter, broke student with a revenge fixation, into whatever Adrian Voss needed her to be. She spent 60 of those minutes in the shower, letting scalding water wash away 5 years of rage-fueled insomnia and cheap diner coffee. When she finally stepped out, the mirror showed someone she barely recognized, thinner than she should be, eyes too old for 28, a scar on her shoulder from the night Sarah died when she'd torn it open, crawling through broken glass to reach her sister's body. The last 13 minutes, she spent getting dressed in the clothes that had been left in the closet. Tailored pants, crisp white shirt, blazer that fit like it had been made for her. Probably had been. Adrian struck her as the type who gathered intelligence on every asset, including measurements. At exactly 7:58, she walked downstairs. Marcus was already waiting,
leaning against a black sedan that probably cost more than her mother's medical bills for the year. He opened the back door without a word, and Lena slid in, feeling the leather seats and climate control like a mockery of everything her life had been until yesterday. The drive took 17 minutes through morning traffic. Lena watched the city transform as they moved from residential neighborhoods into the commercial district, then into the industrial zone where legitimate businesses gave way to warehouses with security that looked more military than civilian. The car stopped in front of a building that looked abandoned from the outside. Graffitied walls, boarded windows, chain-link fence with warning signs about trespassing. But when Marcus pressed a remote, a section of the fence slid open smoothly, and they drove into a courtyard that belonged to a different world entirely. Inside the fence, everything changed. The building's facade was maintained shabby deliberately, but the courtyard held luxury vehicles worth millions. Armed security patrolled in crisp uniforms. Cameras tracked their approach with professional precision. "Top floor," Marcus said, his first words to her. "Mr. Voss is waiting." The elevator was hidden behind what looked like a maintenance door. Inside, it was all polished chrome and soft lighting. Lena watched the numbers climb, 3 floors, 4, 5, and wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. The doors opened onto a hallway that could have belonged to any upscale corporate office, except the receptionist had a gun visible in a shoulder holster, and the art on the walls was worth enough to fund a small country's GDP. "Miss Carter." A woman appeared from a side door, tall and elegant with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I'm Helen Cross, Mr. Voss's executive assistant. He's expecting you." Lena followed Helen down the corridor past offices where people worked at computers and talked on phones like this was a normal business. Maybe it was. Maybe crime empires ran on spreadsheets and conference calls just like everything else. Helen stopped at a set of double doors, knocked twice, and pushed them open. Adrian's office was enormous, taking up the entire corner of the building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the industrial district. The space was divided into distinct zones: a desk area where Adrian sat reviewing documents, a conference table that could seat 12, and a seating area with leather couches arranged around a low table. "Miss Carter." Adrian looked up from his papers, and his eyes did that thing again where they seemed to see straight through her skin. "You're punctual. I appreciate that. You said don't be late, and yet most people still manage to disappoint." He wheeled out from behind the desk, moving with the kind of fluid grace that made the chair look like an extension of his body rather than a limitation. "Helen, bring coffee, and get Victor up here." Helen disappeared, and Lena was left alone with Adrian for the first time since the cafe. In the harsh morning light, he looked different, harder, colder, every inch the man who controlled this city's underworld with ruthless efficiency. "Before we begin," Adrian said, "there are rules you need to understand. First, when you're in this building, you see nothing, hear nothing, and repeat nothing. Information is currency here, and loose lips will get you killed faster than any bullet. Second, you answer to me and only me. Victor is my lieutenant, but your loyalty is to me alone. If he asks you to do something that conflicts with my orders, you come to me. Understood?" "Yes." Third, and most important, Adrian's voice dropped lower, took on an edge that made the hair on Lena's neck stand up. "You never, under any circumstances, reveal that you're investigating Victor. As far as everyone in this organization is concerned, you're a new recruit with useful skills, nothing more." "What kind of skills am I supposed to have?" "Research and analysis. You're going to be working in intelligence, gathering information on our rivals, tracking shipments, monitoring police activity. It's close enough to what you were already doing that you won't have to fake competence." The door opened and Helen returned with coffee, followed by a man Lena recognized from the photograph. Victor Hale was exactly as imposing in person as she'd imagined. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made you step back without realizing you'd moved. His suit was expensive but not flashy, his graying hair cut military short. Everything about him screamed discipline, control, carefully managed power. And this was the man who'd killed Sarah. Lena's hands clenched involuntarily, and she forced them to relax, forced her expression to stay neutral, forced herself to breathe normally, while every instinct screamed at her to reach for the knife she'd transferred to her jacket this morning. "Victor," Adrian said smoothly, "this is Lena Carter. She'll be joining our intelligence division. I want you to brief her on current operations and get her set up with access to our systems.
Victor's eyes swept over Lena with the quick, comprehensive assessment of a career military man evaluating a potential threat.
No offense, boss, but where'd this one come from? We don't usually bring in people off the street.
She came highly recommended.
By who?
By me. Adrian's tone didn't change, but something in the room shifted. A subtle reminder of exactly who was in charge. Unless you're questioning my judgment? Victor's jaw tightened fractionally. Of course not, just being thorough. I appreciate thoroughness, but Miss Carter has skills we need, and I've personally vetted her background. She's clean. Adrian turned to Lena.
Victor runs our field operations. Anything that happens outside these walls, he coordinates. You'll be working closely with him over the next few weeks.
The irony was almost funny. Lena would be working alongside the man she wanted to destroy, gathering evidence against him while he had no idea she was the sister of one of his victims. It was perfect cover. It was also terrifying.
Welcome to the team, Victor said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, professional, his palm slightly calloused. A man who'd done physical work, not just ordered others to do it.
Let's get you started.
Lena spent the next 4 hours learning the structure of Adrian's empire, and it was nothing like she'd expected. There were no drugs, no prostitution, no human trafficking. Instead, Adrian controlled information, logistics, and leverage. He ran a sophisticated network of port access, shipping manifests, and customs officials that allowed him to move anything anywhere without questions. He owned construction companies, real estate portfolios, and enough legitimate businesses to make his illegal operations nearly impossible to trace.
Think of it as a parallel economy, Victor explained, pulling up charts on a massive digital display. We provide services the legal system can't or won't. Someone needs cargo moved without inspection? We handle it. Someone needs a building permit fast-tracked? We make calls. Someone needs a problem to disappear? We solve it.
And the violence?
Lena asked, thinking of the guns she'd seen, the security that looked more like a private army. Protection. Enforcement when necessary. But Adrian doesn't believe in unnecessary bloodshed. Bad for business, draws too much attention. We maintain order through reputation and strategic demonstration, not random violence. Victor said it like he believed it, like the Keller Street massacre had never happened, like 24 people hadn't died because of his arrogance and poor intelligence. Lena wanted to throw it in his face, but she forced herself to nod and take notes like an eager new recruit. By noon, her head was spinning with names, operations, and organizational charts. Victor had introduced her to a dozen people, shown her 3 different offices, and given her access codes to systems that probably contained enough evidence to put everyone in the building away for life.
You're picking this up fast, Victor commented as they headed back to Adrian's office. Most new people take weeks to get the basics.
You're already asking the right questions. I'm motivated. Good. We need motivated. Too many people in this organization have gotten comfortable, forgotten that we're always one mistake away from everything falling apart. He stopped outside Adrian's door.
Can I give you some advice? Off the record?
Lena nodded, wondering what the man who'd killed her sister thought constituted valuable advice. Adrian's brilliant, but he's also paranoid. 3 years in that chair made him suspicious of everyone, always looking for the knife in the back. Don't take it personally when he tests you, because he will. Just keep your head down, do good work, and prove you're loyal. That's all any of us can do. There was something in Victor's voice, a bitterness, maybe, or frustration, like he was speaking from experience, like he'd been tested and found wanting, or tested and resented it. I appreciate the heads up, Lena said. Victor smiled, and it looked genuine. We're going to work well together, Carter. I can tell. He walked away, and Lena stood in the hallway feeling sick. Because Victor seemed like a decent person, professional, competent, even kind in his own way. It would be easier if he was obviously a monster. Instead, he was just a man who'd made a catastrophic decision and somehow managed to live with it. She knocked on Adrian's door and entered without waiting for permission. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid-fire Mandarin to someone who clearly wasn't happy with whatever Adrian was telling them. He waved Lena to a seat and finished the call with what sounded like a polite threat before hanging up. Supply chain issues, he said by way of explanation. Everyone wants their shipments priority. Nobody wants to pay priority prices.
How was your morning with Victor? Educational. Lena pulled out the notebook where she'd been taking notes. He showed me the organizational structure, introduced me to key personnel, gave me access to your intelligence databases. And he seems competent, professional. Nothing about him suggests he's the kind of person who'd order an unauthorized raid that killed 24 civilians. Adrian wheeled over to the window, looking out at the city sprawling below. That's what makes him dangerous. Victor is very good at being exactly what people need him to be. To the men under him, he's a strong leader who protects his team. To our business partners, he's reliable and discreet. To me, he paused. To me, he's a problem I can't solve without proof. Show me what you have so far. Adrian pulled a tablet from his desk and handed it to her. The files were extensive, financial records showing unexplained payments, communications that seemed innocuous until you read them with suspicion, witness statements that had been buried or discredited. Lena scrolled through page after page, her anger building with each new piece of evidence. This is substantial. Why haven't you moved against him? Because it's all circumstantial. Smart lawyers could explain away every single piece. I need something definitive, direct orders, recordings, someone willing to testify that Victor specifically authorized the Keller Street raid. Adrian's fingers drummed on his armrest. That's where you come in. What do you need me to do? Get close to him, win his trust. Victor's careful, but everyone makes mistakes eventually. He'll slip, say something he shouldn't, let something show that he thinks is hidden. When he does, I need you to catch it. You want me to befriend the man who killed my sister. I want you to be professional enough to do what's necessary to bring him down. Adrian's eyes were hard. Can you do that? Or was signing that contract just an emotional response you're already regretting? Lena thought about Sarah. About 5 years of rage that had accomplished nothing. About the choice between revenge and justice. Between dying slowly in pursuit of the first, or living long enough to achieve the second. I can do it, she said. Good, because Victor's already taken an interest in you. He asked me after your meeting if you were available. Available for what? Dinner, drinks, whatever people do when they're attracted to someone. Adrian's expression was unreadable. He's interested in you romantically, which is both an opportunity and a complication. Lena's stomach turned. You can't be serious. Victor has a type, intelligent, driven women who challenge him. You fit that profile perfectly. If you can get close to him that way, it'll give you access to his personal life, his private thoughts, the things he'd never say in a professional context. You're asking me to seduce him for information. I'm asking you to use every tool at your disposal to achieve our mutual goal. What you do with those tools is your decision. Adrian pulled the tablet back. But understand this. Victor is dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with physical threat. He's charming when he wants to be, persuasive. He'll make you doubt everything you know about him. Don't let him. I won't. We'll see. Adrian gestured to the door. Helen will show you to your workspace. You start gathering intelligence on Victor's activities tomorrow. Tonight, go home. Get some rest. You're going to need it. Lena stood to leave, then stopped. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why are you really doing this? I understand wanting to remove a traitor from your organization, but this feels personal. What did Victor do to you? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and something complicated moved across his face. He made me complicit in mass murder. When those people died on Keller Street, the world blamed me. The police, the media, the other families, they all think I ordered that raid. I've spent 5 years living with that reputation, building my empire on a foundation of innocent blood I never spilled. Victor stole my honor, Miss Carter. In my world, that's worse than trying to kill me. Is that why you saved Sarah, because you wanted to prove Victor wrong? I saved Sarah because she was 23 years old and deserved to live. The fact that I failed, he turned his wheelchair away from her, facing the window again. That's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. Just like you. Lena left the office with those words ringing in her ears. Just like you. As if they were the same, she and Adrian. As if they were both victims of Victor's ambition, both carrying the weight of that terrible night. She didn't know if she believed it. Didn't know if Adrian was telling the truth or playing some deeper game she couldn't see yet. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whether he was savior or monster, ally or manipulator, she needed him to get to Victor. And she would use him just as surely as he was using her. Helen showed her to a small office on the 4th floor, equipped with top-of-the-line computers and access to databases that made Lena's amateur investigations look pathetic. There was a desk, a comfortable chair, and a window that looked out over the industrial district where, somewhere, Victor Hale was going about his day completely unaware that his past was catching up to him. Lena sat down and opened the first file. Intelligence reports on rival organizations, shipping manifests, surveillance photos. The kind of work she'd be expected to do as cover for her real investigation. She forced herself to focus, to analyze the data, to start building the competence that would make her invisible and therefore trusted. 3 hours later, her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Dinner tonight? Would love to get to know the new recruit better. Victor." Lena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the delete button. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to keep as much distance as possible between herself and the man who'd destroyed her life. But she thought about Adrian's words, about opportunity and access, about the difference between revenge and justice. She typed back, "Sure, where and when?" The reply came almost immediately. "Morelli's, 8 o'clock. I'll pick you up." Morelli's was the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice, and the wine list started at $300 a bottle. Victor was pulling out all the stops, which meant either he was genuinely interested or this was some kind of test, probably both. Lena called Adrian. He answered on the first ring. "Victor asked me to dinner," she said without preamble. "Tonight." "I know, he cleared it with me first, wanted to make sure I didn't need you for anything." "Did you tell him to do this?" "I suggested he might want to welcome our newest recruit properly. What he chose to do with that suggestion was his own decision." Adrian paused. "Are you going?" "Yes." "Good. Wear the black dress that's in your closet, 3rd from the left. And Lena—" His voice dropped lower. "Be careful. Victor's not just dangerous because of what he's done. He's dangerous because he's genuinely likable. Don't forget who he really is." "I won't forget. Sarah won't let me." "See that she doesn't." Adrian hung up, and Lena sat in her office staring at the files on her screen, the evidence that needed gathering, the mission that required she get close to a killer. She had 6 hours to prepare, 6 hours to transform from grieving sister to sophisticated dinner companion, 6 hours to build armor strong enough to sit across from Victor Hale and smile while her heart screamed for his blood. The black dress fit perfectly, because of course it did. Adrian had probably known this moment would come from the second he'd made his offer in that cafe, had probably planned for it, prepared for it, set everything in motion before Lena even knew she was part of the game. She was a piece on his board, just like Victor, just like everyone in his organization. The only question was whether she could become a player instead of just a piece. At exactly 8 o'clock, Victor's car pulled up outside her apartment. Not a driver this time, Victor himself, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her college tuition, holding the door for her like they were on a normal date. "You look beautiful," he said, and sounded like he meant it. "Thank you." Lena slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her skin. "This is quite the welcome for a new employee." "I like to make good first impressions." Victor started the car, a sleek sports model that purred like a predator. "Besides, Adrian speaks highly of you. Anyone he vouches for personally is worth getting to know." They drove through the city as night fell, lights coming on in buildings like stars in a manufactured sky. Victor made easy conversation, asking about her background with the kind of casual interest that seemed genuine. Lena fed him the cover story Adrian had prepared. College dropout, dead-end jobs, looking for something more meaningful than minimum wage and no future. "Everyone wants meaning," Victor said as they pulled up to the restaurant. "That's what Adrian offers. Purpose. A chance to be part of something bigger than yourself." "Is that why you joined him?" Victor's expression shifted, became something more distant. "I joined Adrian because he saved my life. Literally pulled me out of a burning building when everyone else had written me off as dead. I owe him everything." The story sounded rehearsed, and Lena wondered how much of it was true. How much of Victor's loyalty was genuine gratitude versus calculated survival? Inside, Morelli's was everything she'd expected. Dim lighting, quiet music,
The kind of atmosphere where powerful people made deals over wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. The maitre d' greeted Victor by name and led them to a private booth in the back. "So," Victor said once they'd ordered, "tell me the truth. Why did Adrian really hire you?" Lena's heart skipped, but she kept her expression neutral. "What do you mean?" "Come on, nobody gets brought in at your level without special circumstances. What's your angle? Hacker? Informant? Former cop looking to make real money?" "None of the above. I'm just good at research, and Adrian needed someone in intelligence." "And he personally vetted you, personally set you up in an apartment, personally introduced you to his operation." Victor leaned forward slightly. "That's not standard procedure, Carter. So either you're sleeping with him or you have something he needs. Which is it?" The question was aggressive, almost hostile, and Lena realized this was a test. Victor was probing, seeing how she'd react under pressure, whether she'd crack or hold firm. "I have skills Adrian values," she said evenly. "What I did before joining the organization is between me and him. If you have a problem with my hiring, take it up with your boss." Victor studied her for a long moment, then smiled, genuinely, this time, with what looked like respect. "Good answer. Adrian needs people with spine. Too many yes men in this organization." "Does that include you?" "Especially me." Victor's smile turned rueful. "I learned a long time ago that telling Adrian what he wants to hear is the fastest way to lose his trust. He values honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." The wine arrived, and Victor poured for both of them with practiced ease. Lena took a small sip, letting the expensive vintage sit on her tongue while she studied the man across from her. Up close, in better lighting than the office, she could see the details she'd missed. A scar along his jawline, faded but visible. Calluses on his hands that spoke of physical labor. Exhaustion around his eyes that no amount of expensive grooming could hide. He looked like a man carrying weight, like someone who'd made mistakes and couldn't put them down. "Can I ask you something personal?" Lena said. "You can ask." "I might not answer." "Why dinner? Why go to this much trouble for a new recruit?" Victor set down his glass, and his expression became more serious. "Honestly, because Adrian asked me to keep an eye on you, and I figured this was more pleasant than surveillance, and—" He paused. "And because you remind me of someone." "Who?" "My sister. She died 7 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver. She was smart like you, determined, always asking the questions nobody wanted to answer." Victor's voice had gone quiet. "Adrian knows this, by the way. He probably factored it into his decision to have me work with you." Lena felt something twist in her chest. Victor had lost a sister too. They had that in common, that fundamental grief that changed the shape of your entire life. It made him more human, and therefore more dangerous. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. "Me too." Victor looked at her directly. "So let's make a deal, Carter. You and me, we watch each other's backs in this organization. Adrian's brilliant, but he plays chess with human pieces, and sometimes those pieces end up sacrificed. I don't want that happening to you." "Why would you care what happens to me?" "Because I'm tired of watching good people get destroyed by this life. And you—" He gestured to her with his wine glass. "You're still good. I can see it. You haven't been in long enough to get corrupted yet." Lena almost laughed. If he only knew. If he only realized that she was already corrupted, already planning his destruction, already gathering evidence that would end him. "I can take care of myself," she said. "I'm sure you can. But having someone in your corner doesn't hurt." The dinner continued with surprisingly easy conversation. Victor told stories about the organization, about Adrian's rise to power, about the complex web of alliances and rivalries that kept the empire running. He was charming, funny, self-deprecating in a way that felt genuine, and Lena hated every second of it, because it would be so much easier if he was a monster, if he was cruel or arrogant or obviously evil. Instead, he was just a person, flawed, complicated, trying to navigate impossible circumstances. A person who'd made a catastrophic mistake and somehow convinced himself he could live with it. By the time Victor drove her home, Lena's head was spinning. She'd expected to hate the evening, to suffer through forced pleasantries while gathering intelligence. Instead, she'd almost enjoyed herself, which felt like a betrayal of everything Sarah had been. "Thank you for dinner," she said as they pulled up outside her apartment. "Thank you for the company." Victor smiled. We should do this again sometime. Off the clock. Maybe. She got out of the car and walked to her building, feeling Victor's eyes on her back the entire way. Only when she was inside, door locked behind her, did she let herself breathe normally. Her phone rang. Adrian. How did it go? He asked without preamble. He was charming, likable, told me about his dead sister and offered to protect me from your manipulations. And you believed him? I don't know what to believe anymore. Lena collapsed onto her couch. He seems genuine, Adrian, like he actually cares. Victor's very good at seeming genuine. It's how he's survived this long. Adrian's voice was hard. Don't let him get in your head. Remember what he did. Remember Sarah. I remember. Lena closed her eyes, seeing her sister's face in the darkness. But he doesn't remember. Or he's convinced himself it wasn't his fault. I don't know which is worse. Both are unforgivable, and both are exactly why we need to bring him down. Adrian paused. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, you start digging into his financial records. Look for offshore accounts, unexplained payments, anything that might connect to Keller Street. Adrian. Yes? What if we can't find proof? What if Victor really did cover his tracks perfectly? Then we make him reveal himself. One way or another, he'll show us the truth. Adrian's voice went quieter. Trust me, Lena. Justice is coming. You just have to be patient. The call ended and Lena sat in her expensive apartment surrounded by furniture she hadn't chosen, wearing a dress someone else had picked out, playing a role in a game whose rules she was only beginning to understand. She'd spent 5 years hunting Adrian Voss, and now she worked for him. She'd sworn to avenge her sister, and now she was having dinner with her killer. Everything she'd believed, everything she'd planned, had turned inside out in less than 24 hours. But somewhere in the chaos, a path was forming. Narrow, dangerous, paved with lies and manipulation, but leading towards something that might actually be justice. Lena changed out of the black dress and pulled on the worn t-shirt she'd brought from her old life. It smelled like the cheap laundry detergent she couldn't afford anymore, like the tiny studio apartment where she'd spent 5 years slowly dying of grief. Tomorrow, she'd continue building her cover. She'd analyze intelligence reports and earn Victor's trust and prove herself valuable to Adrian's empire. She'd smile and nod and pretend to be just another recruit looking for purpose in a purposeless world. But tonight, alone in the darkness, she let herself remember Sarah. Let herself feel the rage that no amount of expensive wine or charming conversation could erase. Victor Hale had killed her sister, and no matter how likable he seemed, no matter how complicated the truth became, that fact remained. Lena would see him brought to justice, even if it destroyed her in the process. 3 weeks into her new life, Lena found the first real piece of evidence. It was buried in a financial report from 6 years ago, a single-line item that shouldn't have existed. $200,000 transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, dated 3 days before the Keller Street raid. The payment was coded as operational expenses, but the account number didn't match any of the legitimate vendors in Adrian's system. Lena sat back in her office chair, staring at the screen while her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This was the thread that could unravel everything. She pulled up the associated documents, cross-referencing dates and amounts, building a timeline that started to paint a picture she'd only glimpsed before. The money had moved through 3 different shell corporations before landing in that Cayman account, and the account holder's name, when she finally traced it through layers of legal obfuscation, made her blood run cold. Victor Hale. Not directly, of course. The account was registered to a corporation that was owned by a trust that was managed by a law firm that listed Victor as a silent partner. You'd have to know exactly what you were looking for to make the connection. But once you saw it, the pattern was unmistakable. Victor had been siphoning money from Adrian's organization for years. Lena's hands shook as she downloaded the files, encrypting them and storing them on the secure drive Adrian had given her. This was more than just proof of the Keller Street raid. This was evidence of systematic embezzlement, of betrayal that went far deeper than one terrible decision. She needed to tell Adrian immediately. But when she reached for her phone, it buzzed with an incoming call. Victor. Carter, you free for lunch? His voice was warm, friendly, the same tone he'd used every day for the past 3 weeks as they'd worked together. There's something I want to show you. Lena forced her voice to stay level. Sure. Where? Meet me in the garage. 10 minutes. He hung up before she could ask questions, and Lena sat frozen in her chair. Victor wanted to take her somewhere, right now, just as she'd uncovered evidence that could destroy him. The timing felt too convenient to be coincidence. Did he know? Had he somehow discovered what she was investigating? Lena grabbed her jacket and the encrypted drive, slipping it into her pocket alongside the knife she now carried everywhere. If this was a trap, she'd at least have the evidence with her. At least Adrian would know what she'd found. The garage was empty except for Victor's car and a black SUV with tinted windows. Victor stood beside the SUV, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket that made him look younger, less intimidating. "Change of plans," he said when she approached. "We're taking a drive outside the city. There's something you need to see." "What kind of something?" "The kind that'll help you understand how this organization really works." Victor opened the passenger door. "Trust me." Trust. The word felt like broken glass in Lena's mouth. But she got in the SUV because refusing would raise suspicions, and right now she needed Victor to believe she was exactly what she appeared to be. They drove north, leaving the industrial district behind and heading into the countryside where the city's sprawl gave way to farmland and forest. Victor didn't explain where they were going, just drove with one hand on the wheel and classic rock playing softly from the speakers. "You've been doing good work," he said after 20 minutes of silence. "The intelligence reports you've been putting together. Adrian's impressed. So am I. Just doing my job." "It's more than that. You have instincts most people don't develop until they've been in this life for years. You see patterns, make connections others miss." Victor glanced at her. "Adrian chose well when he brought you in." Lena's hand tightened on the encrypted drive in her pocket. If Victor only knew what patterns she'd been seeing, what connections she'd been making. They turned onto a dirt road that wound through dense forest, branches scraping against the SUV's roof. After another 10 minutes, they emerged into a clearing where an old barn stood, its red paint faded to rust, its roof sagging in the middle. Victor parked and got out. "Come on." Inside the barn was mostly empty, rotted hay bales in one corner, rusted farm equipment in another. But in the center of the space, incongruous against the decay, sat a table with 2 chairs and a laptop. "What is this?" Lena asked. "This is where I come when I need to think." Victor walked to the table and opened the laptop. "Nobody knows about this place except me. Not even Adrian. It's my escape, my place to be honest without worrying about who's listening." He pulled up a file on the laptop, and Lena saw surveillance photos of Adrian's building. Photos taken from angles that suggested someone inside the organization had provided them. "I've been investigating Adrian," Victor said quietly. "For 3 years, ever since the fire that put him in that wheelchair, because something about the official story never sat right with me." Lena's mind reeled. This was the last thing she'd expected. "What are you talking about?" "The fire was supposed to be Adrian's brother trying to kill him, right? Jealousy, ambition, the classic Cain and Abel story. But I've gone through every piece of evidence, every witness statement, and it doesn't add up." Victor pulled up more files. "Adrian's brother was in Tokyo the night of the fire. I have flight records, hotel receipts, security footage. He couldn't have been at that warehouse." "Then who started the fire?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out." Victor looked at her directly, and there was something desperate in his eyes. "Adrian's been lying about what happened that night, and if he's lying about that, what else is he lying about?" Lena felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She'd spent weeks believing Adrian's version of events, trusting that he was the victim of Victor's ambition. But what if it was more complicated? What if they were both lying? "Why are you telling me this?" she asked carefully. "Because I need help. Because everyone in the organization is loyal to Adrian, and I can't trust any of them with this." Victor moved closer. "But you're different. You're new, you're smart, and most importantly, you're not afraid to ask questions. I've watched you these past weeks, Carter. You see things others don't. I need that." It was a recruitment pitch, Lena realized. Victor was trying to flip her, to make her an ally in whatever game he was playing against Adrian. And the terrible part was, she couldn't immediately dismiss what he was saying. Because he was right, she did ask questions. And some of those questions had been about Adrian's motivations, his honesty, his true agenda. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Help me investigate. Use your access to Adrian's systems, your position in intelligence. Find out what really happened 3 years ago and what he's planning now. Victor pulled something from his jacket. A thumb drive. This contains everything I've gathered so far. Study it. Make your own conclusions. Then decide if you want to help me. Lena took the drive, feeling its weight like a stone in her palm. 2 encrypted drives now, one with evidence against Victor, one with evidence against Adrian. She was standing in the middle of a war she didn't fully understand. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need. Just don't tell Adrian about this conversation. Not yet. Victor's expression was deadly serious. I don't know how far his reach extends, but I know he has people everywhere. If he finds out I'm investigating him, I'll disappear, just like everyone else who's crossed him. They drove back to the city in silence, and Lena's mind spun with possibilities and implications. Everything she thought she knew was fracturing, reality splitting into competing versions of the truth. Victor dropped her back at the office with a final warning. Be careful who you trust, Carter. In this world, everyone has an agenda. Lena went straight to Adrian's office, not bothering to knock. He looked up from his desk, took one look at her face, and dismissed the 2 people he'd been meeting with. When they were alone, he wheeled out from behind the desk. What happened? Victor just tried to recruit me to investigate you. Lena pulled out both drives and set them on Adrian's desk. And I found evidence that he's been embezzling from the organization for years. Adrian picked up the drives, studied them, then looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Tell me everything. Lena recounted the entire afternoon, the financial records she'd discovered, Victor's secret barn, his claims about Adrian's brother, and the fire. She left nothing out, watching Adrian's face for reactions that never came. When she finished, Adrian was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that shocked her. Victor's not entirely wrong. What? My brother didn't start the fire. I did. Lena felt her world tilt again. You tried to kill yourself? No, I tried to kill Victor. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. 3 years ago, I discovered Victor had been running unauthorized operations, taking contracts without my approval, putting the entire organization at risk. The Keller Street raid was just the worst of many incidents. I confronted him at the warehouse, and it turned into a fight. The fire started during the struggle. My brother arrived trying to stop it, and he died pulling me out of the flames. So you've been lying about what happened. I've been protecting the organization. If the truth came out, that I'd tried to execute my own lieutenant, that my brother died cleaning up my mess, everything would have fallen apart, so I let people believe the convenient lie. My brother was ambitious, tried to kill me, died in the attempt. It simplified things. Lena stared at him, trying to reconcile this admission with everything she thought she knew. And Victor knows the truth? He suspects. He's been investigating quietly for years, probably hoping to find leverage he can use against me. Adrian plugged one of the drives into his computer. The question is, what does he plan to do with that leverage? He wants me to help him build a case against you. Good. Let him. Adrian pulled up the financial records Lena had found, his eyes scanning the data with frightening speed. This embezzlement evidence is solid, better than anything I've found before. If we can connect it directly to the Keller Street payments, we'll have everything we need. You want me to keep working with him, even though he knows I'm close to you? Especially because he knows that. Victor's getting desperate, which means he's getting sloppy. He showed you his secret location, gave you his research. He's trying to create an ally because he can feel the walls closing in. Adrian looked up from the screen. Play along. Let him think you're considering his offer. The more he trusts you, the more he'll reveal. And if he realizes I'm playing him, if he figures out I'm Sarah Carter's sister, he won't. Victor's brilliant at tactics, but he's blind to emotional connections. He sees you as a useful asset, not a person with a history. Adrian's expression softened slightly. That's his weakness. He forgets people have motivations beyond profit and power. Lena thought about Victor's dead sister, about the grief she'd seen in his eyes when he talked about her. He wasn't completely blind to emotion. He'd just learned to compartmentalize it, to separate personal pain from professional necessity. Just like she was doing now. There's something else, she said. The offshore account where Victor's been sending money. I traced it further. Some of those funds have been moving to a secondary account. I couldn't break through the encryption,
But the bank is in Singapore, and the amounts match up with... Her phone rang. Unknown number. Adrian nodded for her to answer. Hello? Lena Carter? The voice was female, professional, with a slight accent she couldn't place. I'm calling from Meadowbrook Care Facility regarding your mother. Lena's blood went cold. What's wrong? Your mother had an episode this morning. She's stable now, but the doctor would like to discuss adjusting her medication. Can you come in today? I'll be there in an hour. She hung up, and Adrian was already reaching for his phone. I'll have Marcus drive you. I can take the bus. Marcus will drive you. And Lena. He waited until she met his eyes. Take the rest of the day. Family comes first. The concern in his voice sounded genuine, and that bothered her more than it should have, because she needed Adrian to be the monster, the manipulative crime lord using her as a pawn. She needed him to be simple, uncomplicated, purely evil. But he kept doing things that made him human, and that made everything harder. Meadowbrook Care Facility was on the other side of the city, a converted Victorian mansion that charged astronomical fees to provide round-the-clock care for patients with advanced dementia. Lena had been paying those fees with the money from her 3 part-time jobs, barely scraping by, watching her savings evaporate month after month. Now, thanks to Adrian's salary, she could afford it easily. Another complication, another layer of obligation tying her to a man she should hate. Her mother was in the garden when Lena arrived, sitting in a wheelchair and staring at nothing. Margaret Carter had been a brilliant mathematician before the disease took her mind, a woman who could solve equations that made other professors weep. Now she was a ghost wearing her mother's face, present but not present, alive but not living. Hi, Mom, Lena said, kneeling beside the wheelchair. Margaret looked at her with vague recognition. Sarah? Is that you, baby? The name was a knife to the heart, just like it was every time. It's Lena, Mom, your other daughter. Lena. Margaret's face brightened with temporary clarity. Where's your sister? She promised she'd visit today. Sarah couldn't make it. The lie tasted like ash. But I'm here. They sat together in the garden while Margaret drifted in and out of lucidity, sometimes recognizing Lena, sometimes thinking she was Sarah, sometimes not knowing either of them at all. The doctor came after 30 minutes, explained the medication adjustment, assured Lena that these episodes were normal for her mother's condition. Normal. As if there was anything normal about watching your parent disappear piece by piece, memory by memory, until nothing remained but a body breathing out of habit. Lena stayed until visiting hours ended, holding her mother's hand while the sun set and nurses came to take Margaret inside for dinner. As she walked to the parking lot, her phone buzzed with a text from Victor. Thought about my offer? We should talk. Before she could respond, another text came through, this one from Adrian. How's your mother? 2 men, both dangerous, both using her for their own purposes. One had killed her sister, the other had tried to save her, but which one was telling the truth now? Lena sat in Marcus's car and pulled out both encrypted drives, weighing them in her hands like scales of justice. Evidence against Victor. Evidence against Adrian. She was the only one who held all the pieces, the only one who could see the full picture. And the picture was terrifying, because both men were guilty. Both had lied. Both had blood on their hands. Victor had ordered the raid that killed Sarah and 23 others. Adrian had started the fire that killed his own brother. They were predator and predator, circling each other in an endless dance of violence and revenge. And she was caught between them, being pulled in 2 directions by competing truths. Her phone rang again, this time a number she recognized. Helen, Adrian's assistant. Miss Carter, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Mr. Voss asked me to inform you that there's been a development. Can you return to the office? What kind of development? He didn't say, but he asked for you specifically. Lena told Marcus to head back, her mind racing through possibilities. What could Adrian have found in the hours she'd been gone? What new piece had fallen into place? When she arrived at the office, it was after 8 p.m., and the building was mostly empty. Adrian's office lights were on, and through the windows she could see him with 2 other people she didn't recognize. Helen met her at the elevator. They're waiting for you. Inside Adrian's office, the atmosphere was tense. The 2 strangers were rough-looking men in their 40s, ex-military by the way they carried themselves. One had a scar running from his ear to his chin,
The other was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. "Miss Carter," Adrian said, "these gentlemen have information about Victor Hale that I think you'll want to hear." The scarred man spoke first. "My name's Davis. I was part of the team that ran the Keller Street operation 5 years ago. Victor Hale ordered that raid personally, told us we were hitting a weapons cache belonging to the Mendoza cartel. When we got there and realized it was civilians, we radioed for clarification. Victor told us to proceed anyway." Lena felt her knees go weak. "You're saying he knew there were civilians and ordered you to shoot anyway?" "Not exactly. He told us the intelligence was solid, that anyone in that area was cartel affiliated. We believed him." Davis's voice was heavy with regret. "We didn't know we were killing innocent people until it was too late. By then, the damage was done." "Why are you coming forward now?" Lena asked. "Because Victor's been cleaning house. 3 of the guys from that team have died in the past year. Accidents, overdoses, 1 suicide. We're next on the list. He's tying up loose ends before someone talks." The other man, the one missing fingers, held up his damaged hand. "This wasn't an accident. This was a warning. Victor's people grabbed me last week, told me to keep my mouth shut or lose more than just fingers." Adrian's voice cut through the room like ice. "They came to me because they know I want Victor gone, and because they know I protect people who tell me the truth." "You have proof of this?" Lena asked Davis. He pulled out a phone. "Recordings of the radio communications from that night. You can hear Victor giving the orders. Hear him telling us to proceed even after we reported civilian presence." Lena listened to the audio with her heart in her throat. Victor's voice, younger but unmistakable, cold and decisive, as he ordered men to fire on a building full of innocent people. Orders that killed Sarah, that destroyed 24 families, that set Lena on this path of revenge that had consumed 5 years of her life. "Why didn't you come forward before?" she asked when the recording ended. "Fear, guilt, the same reasons anyone stays silent about terrible things." Davis met her eyes. "But I can't live with it anymore. Victor Hale needs to answer for what he did, and if Adrian can make that happen, I'll testify to anything you need." Adrian dismissed the 2 men with instructions to stay in a safe house he'd prepared. When they were gone, he turned to Lena. "This is it. This is the proof we need. Combined with the financial evidence you found, we can take Victor down at the council meeting next week." "The council meeting?" "Every quarter I meet with the senior members of the organization to discuss strategy and settle disputes. It's the one time everyone's together, the one time I can make major decisions with full transparency." Adrian's eyes glittered. "We'll present the evidence, let the council hear the truth. Victor won't be able to talk his way out of this. He'll fight back. He has resources, people loyal to him. Which is why we need to be careful. Between now and the meeting, you maintain your relationship with Victor. Keep him thinking you're considering his offer. The more secure he feels, the less likely he is to run." Lena nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to what would happen at that meeting. The confrontation, the revelation, the moment when Victor finally faced justice for Sarah's death. She should have felt triumphant, should have felt like the 5-year hunt was finally reaching its conclusion. Instead, she felt hollow. Because justice, when it finally arrived, looked nothing like she'd imagined. It wasn't clean or satisfying. It was messy and complicated, tangled up with lies and manipulation and the uncomfortable truth that sometimes monsters were made, not born. "There's one more thing," Adrian said quietly. "The Singapore account you found, I finished tracing it. The money's been going to a woman named Rachel Mendez. She lives in Miami with a 12-year-old daughter." "Who is she?" "Victor's ex-wife and child. He's been sending them money for years, keeping them safe and far away from his life here." Adrian pulled up a photo on his computer. A woman with kind eyes and a girl who had Victor's smile. "He's not all monster, Lena. Parts of him are still human. Remembering that might matter when the time comes." Are you saying I should feel sorry for him?" "I'm saying revenge is simpler when your enemy is pure evil, but people rarely are. Victor made terrible choices that cost innocent lives. He's also a man trying to protect his family, trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive weakness. Both things are true." Lena looked at the photo of Victor's daughter, this child who had no idea her father was a killer, who loved him despite everything because he was still her dad. She thought of Sarah, who'd loved Lena the same way.
Uncomplicated, unconditional, the kind of love that made you run into gunfire to save your little sister. When this is over, she said, what happens to them? His family? They keep the money, keep their lives. Victor's sins aren't theirs to carry. Adrian closed the laptop. Go home, Lena. Get some rest. Next week everything changes. Marcus drove her back through the city as night deepened into the early hours of morning. Lena watched the streets pass by, thinking about justice and revenge, about the difference between punishing the guilty and destroying everyone they touched. When she got home, there was a package waiting outside her door. No return address, just her name written in precise handwriting. Inside was a book, a leather-bound journal with blank pages, and tucked into the first page, a note in that same precise hand. For the thoughts you can't say out loud, sometimes we all need a place to be honest. V. Lena sat on her couch holding the journal, this gift from a man who'd killed her sister, who was trying to recruit her, who thought he was building an alliance when really he was walking into a trap. She opened to the first page and wrote a single sentence. I don't know who the monster is anymore. Then she locked the journal away, climbed into bed, and dreamed of Sarah. Dreams where her sister was alive and laughing, where the Keller Street raid had never happened, where Lena was still innocent enough to believe that good and evil were simple, distinct, easy to tell apart. She woke before dawn with tears on her face and the absolute certainty that next week would change everything. One way or another, justice was coming. And Lena Carter would be there to witness it, even if watching the truth unfold destroyed whatever was left of her soul. Part 4 lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần, duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đầu kịch tính không viết lan mạn, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chi dân bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm cái mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Show more 13 giờ 25 phút. The council meeting was set for Friday at noon, which gave Lena 5 days to hold herself together while the world she'd built threatened to collapse around her. Victor called her Tuesday morning, his voice casual but insistent. Lunch today? I want to hear what you thought about the information I gave you. They met at a quiet bistro on the waterfront, away from Adrian's territory and Victor's usual haunts. Neutral ground. Victor ordered wine expensive enough to make Lena's former self weep, then leaned back in his chair with the kind of easy confidence that came from believing he was in control. So? He asked. Did you look at the files? I did. Lena chose her words carefully, aware that every sentence was a tightrope walk between maintaining cover and outright lies. The evidence about Adrian's brother is compelling. If what you're saying is true, Adrian's been lying to the entire organization for 3 years. It's true. I verified every piece of it. Victor leaned forward, intensity replacing his casual demeanor. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We? You and me, Carter. I can't take Adrian down alone. He's too entrenched, has too many people loyal to him personally rather than to the organization. But if we work together, pool our resources and evidence, we can expose him for what he really is. Lena took a sip of wine, buying herself time to think. This was the moment where she had to commit to the performance, to make Victor believe she was genuinely considering betraying Adrian. One wrong word, one false note in her voice, and the whole carefully constructed plan would shatter. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. At the quarterly council meeting on Friday, I'm going to present evidence of Adrian's deception. His fabricated story about the fire, his brother's innocence, everything. But I need corroboration, someone else in the organization willing to stand up and confirm that they've seen inconsistencies in Adrian's version of events. Victor's eyes locked onto hers.
I need you to testify alongside me. The audacity of it stole Lena's breath. Victor was planning to use the same meeting where Adrian intended to expose him to launch his own attack. They were both preparing to strike, each confident the other had no idea what was coming. "If I do this," Lena said slowly, "and you're wrong about Adrian, I'll be destroyed. He'll see it as the worst kind of betrayal. And if I'm right, you'll be on the winning side when the power structure shifts. Adrian will be removed from leadership, and the organization will need people they can trust to rebuild." Victor reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I know it's a risk, but sometimes you have to bet everything on what you know is right." The touch made Lena's skin crawl, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she met Victor's eyes and saw something there that made her stomach turn. Genuine belief. He actually thought he was the righteous one, that exposing Adrian was an act of justice rather than self-preservation. Or maybe he'd simply convinced himself of that because the alternative was admitting he'd killed 24 innocent people and spent 5 years covering it up. "I need to think about it," Lena said. "We don't have much time. The meeting's in 3 days. Then I'll give you my answer in 2. She pulled her hand back, reached for her wine. "This isn't a decision I can make lightly." Victor studied her for a long moment, and Lena could practically see him calculating, weighing her hesitation against his need for an ally. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough. But Carter," his voice dropped lower, "once the meeting starts, there's no staying neutral. You'll have to choose a side. Make sure you choose the right one." After lunch, Lena went straight to Adrian's office. He was in a meeting with his financial advisors, but when Helen announced Lena's arrival, he dismissed them immediately. "Victor wants me to testify against you at the council meeting," Lena said the moment they were alone. "He's planning his own reveal, his own moment of truth. He thinks he's going to expose you for lying about your brother's death." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise, but a kind of grim satisfaction. "Good. Let him think he's going to win. The higher his confidence, the harder he'll fall. He's convincing, Adrian. The evidence he has about the fire, about your brother being in Tokyo, it's solid. If he presents it alongside testimony from someone the council trusts, then we present our evidence first." Adrian wheeled to his desk and pulled up a document on his computer. "The council meeting has a set agenda. As chairman, I control the order of business. We'll address Victor's embezzlement and the Keller Street massacre before he has a chance to make his accusations. And if he tries to interrupt? If he forces the issue? Then we'll have Davis and his partner ready to testify immediately. Victor can't talk his way out of audio recordings of him ordering the death of civilians." Adrian turned to face her fully. "Are you having doubts, Lena? Because if you are, now's the time to say so." Lena thought about the journal Victor had given her, about his daughter in Miami who thought her father was a good man, about the complicated truth that people could be both monster and human, guilty and sympathetic, all at once. "No doubts about Victor facing justice," she said carefully. "But I need to know something. When you started that fire 3 years ago, when you tried to kill Victor, were you trying to punish him for Keller Street specifically? Or was there more to it?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Keller Street was the breaking point, but it wasn't the beginning. Victor had been going rogue for months, taking contracts without authorization, using organization resources for personal vendettas. I'd warned him, tried to rein him in, but he kept pushing boundaries. The night I confronted him at that warehouse, I just learned that 24 civilians were dead because of his arrogance. I wasn't thinking about organizational efficiency or strategic positioning. I was thinking about a 23-year-old law student who died in an alley while her sister watched. "You were thinking about Sarah." "I was thinking about all of them, every single person whose death could have been prevented if I'd dealt with Victor sooner." Adrian's hands tightened on his armrests. "My brother died pulling me out of that fire because I lost control, because I let rage override judgment. That's on me. But the fire itself, the confrontation, that was necessary. Victor needed to be stopped. And instead he spent 3 years consolidating power and planning to overthrow you. Which is why this meeting is critical. We end this on Friday, one way or another." Lena left Adrian's office with her head spinning and her heart heavy. 2 more days until the council meeting. 48 hours to maintain her cover,
to keep Victor believing she might betray Adrian, to hold all the pieces together until the moment of truth. Wednesday morning, she visited her mother at Meadowbrook. Margaret was having a good day, lucid enough to recognize Lena, to ask about work and life and all the normal things mothers ask their daughters. They sat in the garden while autumn leaves fell around them, and for an hour Lena could almost pretend everything was normal. "You look tired, sweetheart," Margaret said, her thin hand patting Lena's knee. "Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine, Mom." "You were always a terrible liar." Margaret's smile was gentle, knowing. "Even as a little girl, you wore your heart on your face. Sarah was the one who could keep secrets." The mention of Sarah sent a sharp pain through Lena's chest. "I miss her." "So do I. Every day." Margaret's eyes went distant, slipping slightly out of the present. "She was going to change the world, you know. That's what she told me the last time I saw her. She was going to be a lawyer and fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves." "I know, Mom." "Are you fighting for people, Lena? Are you doing something that matters?" The question hit harder than it should have. Was she fighting for people, or just feeding her own need for revenge? Was bringing Victor down about justice for Sarah and the 23 others, or was it about easing the guilt that had eaten at her for 5 years? "I'm trying," Lena said finally. "I'm trying to make things right. That's all any of us can do." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Just promise me you won't lose yourself in the process. Your sister wouldn't want that. She'd want you to live, really live, not spend your whole life looking backward." Lena stayed until visiting hours ended, then returned to her apartment to find Victor waiting in the hallway outside her door. "We need to talk," he said, and there was something different in his voice, something urgent. Inside, Victor paced her living room like a caged animal, all the casual confidence stripped away. "Adrian knows. I don't know how, but he knows I'm planning something. He moved up his security detail, brought in external contractors I've never seen before. He's preparing for a confrontation. Maybe he's just being cautious. No, this is different." Victor stopped pacing, turned to face her. "I think there might be a leak in my team, someone feeding him information about my plans." Lena's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. "What are you going to do?" "Move up my timeline. I can't wait for the council meeting. I need to act now, tonight, before Adrian has time to consolidate his position." Victor pulled out his phone, started scrolling through contacts. "I'm calling an emergency meeting of the senior lieutenants. We'll vote to remove Adrian from leadership based on his deception about the fire." "That's not how it works. The council won't recognize an emergency vote without Adrian's presence." "Then we force his presence. We go to him together, present our evidence, and demand he step down for the good of the organization." Victor looked at her with desperate intensity. "Are you with me, Carter? Because this is it. This is the moment where you choose." Every instinct screamed at Lena to refuse, to protect Adrian's plan, to wait for Friday when everything would unfold as intended. But refusing now would expose her, would tell Victor she'd been playing him all along. And if he disappeared before the council meeting, if he went underground with his resources and connections, they might never get another chance to bring him to justice. "I'm with you," she heard herself say. "But we do this smart. We gather the lieutenants first, make sure we have the votes. Then we confront Adrian together with enough support that he can't just dismiss us." Victor's relief was visible. "Thank you. I knew I could count on you." He left to make calls, and Lena immediately contacted Adrian. He answered on the first ring. "Victor's moving tonight," she said without preamble. "He wants to call an emergency meeting and force you to step down. I bought us time by suggesting he gather support first, but he's spooked. He knows something's wrong." "How many lieutenants does he think he can turn?" "Maybe 4 or 5. Enough to make it a real challenge to your authority." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Then we move our timeline up as well. Tell Victor you'll help him gather support. Bring him and whoever he convinces to the main conference room at 8 tonight. I'll have our witnesses ready." "Adrian, if this goes wrong, it won't. Victor's been running on arrogance and luck for 3 years. Tonight, both run out." The hours until 8 p.m. crawled past like years. Lena helped Victor contact the lieutenants he thought might support him, watching him build what he believed was a coalition to overthrow Adrian. 4 men agreed to come to the meeting, all of them mid-level operators who'd worked with Victor for years and trusted him more than they trusted Adrian's cold calculation. By 7:30, they were gathering in the conference room.
Victor paced at the head of the table, going over his presentation one more time, rehearsing the accusations and evidence. The four lieutenants sat quietly, clearly uncomfortable with what they were about to do, but convinced by Victor's passion that it was necessary. Lena stood by the window, watching the sun set over the industrial district and wondering if this was how Sarah had felt in her last moments, aware that something terrible was about to happen, but powerless to stop it. At exactly 8 p.m., the conference room doors opened and Adrian wheeled in, followed by Helen and 6 security personnel. Behind them came Davis and his partner, the 2 men who'd testified about the Keller Street raid. Victor's face went pale. "What is this?" "This," Adrian said calmly, "is a reckoning." He gestured to Helen, who pulled up a large screen at the front of the room. Financial records appeared, the same ones Lena had discovered, showing years of embezzlement, offshore accounts, money laundering through shell corporations. "For the past 5 years," Adrian said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "Victor Hale has been stealing from this organization. $2 million transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland. Money that should have gone to operations, to our people, to building the infrastructure that keeps us all safe." Victor found his voice. Those are legitimate operational expenses." "Operational expenses sent to accounts registered in your name?" Adrian's tone could have frozen water. "Would you like to explain to these gentlemen why your daughter's private school tuition is coming out of organization funds?" One of the lieutenants stood up. "Victor, is this true?" "It's more complicated than it looks. It's embezzlement," Adrian cut in. "Clear, documented, impossible to dispute. But that's not the worst of it." He nodded to Helen, and the screen changed to show the Keller Street warehouse. Lena's breath caught as she recognized the building where Sarah had died. 5 years ago, Adrian continued, 24 civilians were killed in a raid on this location. The official story was that we were targeting a Mendoza cartel weapons cache. The truth is very different. Davis stepped forward. "My name is Marcus Davis. I led the tactical team for the Keller Street operation. Victor Hale ordered that raid personally, told us it was a legitimate target. When we arrived and realized there were civilians present, we radioed for clarification. Victor told us to proceed anyway." "That's a lie," Victor said, but his voice had lost its strength. "I have the audio recordings." Davis pulled out his phone, and suddenly Victor's voice filled the conference room. Young, confident, giving orders that killed 24 people. "Team leader, this is command. You are authorized to engage all targets in the structure. Repeat, all targets. Command, we have visual on civilians. At least a dozen non-combatants. Request permission to abort." "Negative. Intelligence confirms all persons in the target area are cartel affiliated. Proceed with the operation." The recording continued for another 30 seconds. Gunfire, screaming, Davis's voice calling for a ceasefire that came too late. When it ended, the conference room was silent as a grave. Lena stood frozen, hearing her sister's death in that audio, hearing the moment Sarah's fate was sealed by Victor's arrogance and lies. One of the lieutenants stood up. "You told us that was Adrian's operation. You told us he authorized the civilian casualties." "I told you what needed to be told to protect the organization," Victor said, but he was looking at Adrian now, not the lieutenants. "The intelligence was supposed to be solid. I didn't know—" "You knew." Adrian's voice was ice. "You knew the moment Davis radioed about civilians, and you ordered him to proceed anyway. 24 people died because you couldn't admit you were wrong." Victor's composure cracked. "What would you have had me do? Abort the operation and look weak? Admit to everyone that my intelligence was faulty? The organization would have lost faith in my leadership. So you killed innocent people to protect your ego." "I made a hard choice in an impossible situation." Victor's voice rose to a shout. "We all make choices like that in this life. You've done the same, Adrian. Don't pretend you're better than me." "I am better than you, because when I make mistakes, I own them. I don't murder my way out of them and then blame the victims." Adrian gestured to the screen where images of the dead now appeared. Sarah Carter, 23 years old. Miguel Rodriguez, 17. Janet Chen, 46. Marcus Washington, 32. I can name all 24 of them, Victor. Can you? Victor stood at the head of the table, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes and the men who'd once trusted him. Lena could see the calculation in his eyes, The desperate search for an escape route that didn't exist. "You're finished," one of the lieutenants said, his voice filled with disgust. "You lied to us, used us, made us complicit in murder." "We're all complicit," Victor's voice cracked. "Every single person in this room has blood on their hands. That's what this life is. That's what we chose when we joined Adrian's empire. Don't act like you're innocent." "We chose to be criminals," Adrian said quietly. "Not monsters. There's a difference." Victor laughed, and it was a broken sound. "Is there? You started a fire that killed your own brother, Adrian. You've ordered executions, intimidated witnesses, corrupted officials. You run an empire built on violence and fear, and you want to judge me for one mistake?" 24 people isn't a mistake, it's a massacre. "It was war!" Victor slammed his hand on the table. "We were at war with the Mendoza cartel, and people die in war. Collateral damage happens. Don't!" The word came from Lena, and everyone in the room turned to look at her. She stepped away from the window, moving into the light, and for the first time since entering Adrian's world, she let Victor see who she really was. "My name is Lena Carter," she said, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "Sarah Carter was my sister. She was 23 years old, studying law at the university because she wanted to help people. She was walking home from the library when your raid started. She could have survived. Adrian pulled her to safety behind a car, but she ran back out into the open because she saw me hiding and wanted to save me." Victor's face went white. "You're the sister of one of your victims?" "Yes." Lena pulled out her phone and brought up a photo of Sarah, smiling and alive and full of future. "This is what collateral damage looks like, Victor. This is the person you killed because you couldn't admit you were wrong." "I didn't know." "You didn't care to know. That's worse." Lena put the phone away. "For 5 years, I've been hunting the person responsible for Sarah's death. I tracked Adrian, investigated his organization, convinced myself he was the monster who needed to pay. And then I learned the truth. It was you. It was always you." Victor looked from Lena to Adrian, and understanding dawned on his face. "You've been working together. This whole time, the investigation, the recruitment, the dinner, it was all a trap." "It was justice," Adrian corrected. "We gave you rope, and you hanged yourself with it." The security personnel moved closer, surrounding Victor on all sides. He looked at each of them, then at the lieutenants who'd come to support him, and now looked at him with revulsion. Finally, his eyes landed on Lena. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Adrian wheeled forward until he was directly in front of Victor. "Now you face the consequences of your actions. I'm calling a formal council vote to remove you from the organization and turn you over to law enforcement. Davis has agreed to testify against you in exchange for immunity. The families of your victims will finally get their day in court. The legal system will never touch me. You know that. My lawyers will tie this up for years, and evidence from criminals isn't admissible, which is why we have one more piece of evidence." Adrian nodded to Helen, and she brought up a new recording. This one was recent. Victor's voice from just 2 days ago, talking to someone on the phone. "The Keller Street situation needs to stay buried. If anyone starts asking questions, use the usual channels. Intimidation, relocation if necessary. Whatever it takes to keep the witnesses quiet." It was an admission of guilt, a confession that the Keller Street massacre was something Victor actively worked to cover up, and more damning, it proved consciousness of guilt. He knew what he'd done was wrong, and took steps to hide it. Victor sat down heavily in his chair, all the fight draining out of him. "How long have you been recording my calls?" "Since the moment Lena found evidence of your embezzlement. I had Helen install monitoring software on your phone, your computer, every device you use." Adrian's smile was sharp as a blade. "You were right when you said I'm paranoid. I learned that from you." The room fell into silence. Finally, Victor looked at Lena, and there was something in his eyes that might have been regret. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm sorry about your sister. I didn't know her name, didn't know she was just a student walking home. If I could take it back—" "But you can't." Lena's voice was hard. "Sarah is dead, and 23 other people are dead, and you've spent 5 years lying about it instead of taking responsibility. Your sorry doesn't mean anything." Victor nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. Then he turned to Adrian. "What about my daughter, my ex-wife?
They had nothing to do with any of this. They keep the money you sent them, keep their lives. Your sins don't touch them. Adrian gestured to the security team. Take him to holding. We'll arrange the transfer to police custody tomorrow. As they led Victor out of the conference room, he stopped at the door and looked back at Adrian. You know what the difference between us really is? I made one catastrophic mistake and spent 5 years trying to hide from it. You've been making calculated decisions to destroy people for decades, and you sleep fine at night. Tell me which one of us is really the monster. Well, but the one who murdered 24 innocent people and called it collateral damage, Adrian said. Take him away. When Victor was gone, the lieutenant stood uncertainly, looking at Adrian for guidance. Gentlemen, Adrian said calmly, what you witnessed tonight stays in this room. Victor Hale betrayed the organization, stole from us, and lied about mass murder. He's been removed from his position, and I'll be appointing new leadership to fill the vacancy. Are there any objections? Silence. Then one by one, the lieutenants shook their heads. Good. You're dismissed. Helen will be in touch about the transition. They filed out quickly, clearly relieved to escape the tension. When the room was empty, except for Adrian, Lena, and Davis, Adrian finally allowed himself to relax slightly. Well done, he said to Davis. Your testimony was perfect. Just telling the truth. Davis looked at Lena. For what it's worth, Miss Carter, I'm glad your sister's getting justice, even if it's 5 years too late. After Davis left, Lena collapsed into one of the conference chairs, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving her hollow. It's done, she said numbly. Victor's going to pay for what he did. Adrian wheeled closer. Are you all right? I don't know. I thought I'd feel different when this moment came, triumphant or vindicated or something. Instead, I just feel... She trailed off, unable to find words for the complicated mess of emotions churning inside her. Empty, Adrian finished, because revenge doesn't fill the hole that loss creates. It just gives you something to focus on instead of feeling it. Lena looked at him, really looked at him, seen past the crime lord exterior to the man underneath. You knew this wouldn't make me feel better, didn't you? You knew revenge was just another kind of grief. I knew, but you needed to see it for yourself. Adrian's expression was gentle, almost sad. The question now is, what do you do with the rest of your life? You've spent 5 years hunting Victor. Who are you when that's over? It was the same question her mother had asked, the same question Lena had been avoiding since the moment she signed Adrian's contract. I don't know, she admitted. Then we'll figure it out together. Adrian extended his hand, not as employer and employee, as partners, if you want that. Lena stared at his offered hand, at this man who'd saved her sister and failed, who'd built an empire on calculated violence, who'd given her the tools to achieve justice, even though he knew it wouldn't heal her. He was still a criminal, still dangerous, still someone whose hands were stained with blood. But he'd been honest with her when everyone else had lied. She took his hand. Partners, she agreed. Outside, the city lights flickered on as night fell completely, and somewhere in a holding cell, Victor Hale sat with the consequences of choices made 5 years ago finally catching up to him. Tomorrow, the legal system would begin its slow grind toward justice. Families would be notified. A trial would be scheduled. The truth would finally see daylight. But tonight, in Adrian's conference room, Lena Carter felt the weight of 5 years of rage finally begin to lift. Not disappearing entirely. Sarah would always be gone. The hole would always be there, but becoming something she could carry instead of something that carried her. It wasn't closure, it wasn't peace, but it was a beginning. And sometimes that was enough. The transfer happened at dawn. Lena stood in Adrian's office, watching through the windows as 2 unmarked police vehicles pulled into the secure courtyard. Detective Sarah Morales emerged from the first car, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen too much corruption to trust anyone completely. She's one of the clean ones, Adrian said from behind his desk. Been trying to build a case against Victor for years. This will be the biggest arrest of her career. Below, Victor was led out in handcuffs, flanked by Adrian's security until the moment he was transferred to police custody. Even from this distance, Lena could see the defeat in his posture, the way his shoulders slumped like a man finally laying down a weight he'd carried too long. Do you think he'll talk? Lena asked.
Try to make a deal by giving up information about your organization? He'll try.
But the evidence Davis provided is ironclad. The DA won't need Victor's testimony to make the Keller Street case, which means his cooperation is worth less than he thinks.
Adrian wheeled closer to the window.
Besides, Victor knows what happens to people who betray me. His daughter is safe as long as he keeps his mouth shut about certain operations. He'll take the deal that lets him protect his family. Lena watched the police cars drive away, carrying Victor toward a justice system that would spend months, maybe years, dissecting what happened that terrible night 5 years ago. Sarah's name would be read in court. Her death would be documented, analyzed, assigned a value in the currency of legal precedent. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of a story she'd been telling herself for so long that she'd forgotten how to live without it.
What happens now? She asked quietly.
Now?
Adrian turned from the window to look at her. Now you decide who you want to be. The words echoed her mother's question, and Lena wondered if this was what healing looked like. Multiple people asking the same thing until you finally found an answer that felt true. I don't know how to be anyone except the girl hunting her sister's killer, she admitted. Then learn. Adrian's voice was gentle but firm. You have resources now. A salary that lets you breathe. Connections that could take you anywhere. You could leave this organization, go back to school, start the life Sarah would have wanted for you. Or, he paused, or you stay. Keep working in intelligence. Help me build something better than what Victor corrupted. Better? You run a criminal empire. I run an organization that exists in the space between law and chaos. We could make that space smaller, cleaner. Use our influence to actually help people instead of just extracting profit from their desperation. Adrian met her eyes. You've seen how the system works, Lena, how the police are underfunded and overwhelmed, how justice depends on who can afford the best lawyers, how innocent people get crushed between competing powers. We could change that. Not by becoming heroes, but by being smart about where we apply pressure. It was a seductive vision. Using Adrian's empire for something beyond simple crime, turning it into a force that actually protected people like Sarah instead of destroying them. But it was also naive. Or maybe just another version of the story Adrian told himself to sleep at night. You're asking me to stay in the darkness, Lena said. I'm asking you to bring light to it. There's a difference. Before Lena could respond, her phone buzzed. Meadowbrook Care Facility. Her heart dropped into her stomach as she answered. Miss Carter, I'm sorry to call so early. The nurse's voice was professionally gentle, which meant bad news. Your mother had another episode last night. She's stable, but the doctor wants to discuss next steps in her care. Lena closed her eyes. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up and found Adrian watching her with something that looked like understanding. Go, he said. Family first. We'll talk about the future when you're ready. Marcus drove her to Meadowbrook through morning traffic, and Lena stared out the window at a city waking up to another ordinary day. People heading to work, kids waiting for school buses, vendors opening their shops. Normal lives, untouched by the violence and betrayal that had consumed hers. At the facility, Dr. Patel met her in the lobby, a kind-faced man who'd been treating her mother for 2 years. He led her to his office, offered coffee she didn't want, and then delivered the news she'd been dreading. Your mother's dementia is progressing faster than we anticipated. The episodes are becoming more frequent and more severe. She's starting to pose a danger to herself, wandering, forgetting to eat, becoming agitated when she doesn't recognize her surroundings. What are you recommending? A transfer to our specialized memory care unit. 24-hour supervision, higher level of medical intervention. It's more expensive, but given your recent change in financial circumstances, it should be manageable. Of course he knew about her sudden income. Everyone at Meadowbrook knew everything about their patients' families. It was how they ensured bills got paid. How long? Lena asked, though she already knew the answer. Until the end. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. With dementia this aggressive, we're looking at months rather than years. The words landed like physical blows, even though Lena had known this was coming. Had watched her mother slip away piece by piece, memory by memory, until sometimes Lena wondered if Margaret Carter was already gone, and they were just keeping her body comfortable while they mourned. She signed the transfer paperwork, authorized the higher level of care, and then went to see her mother in the garden where Margaret spent most of her good days. Today wasn't a good day.
Margaret sat in her wheelchair, staring at nothing, her hands plucking at the blanket across her lap in a repetitive motion that spoke of deep confusion. When Lena sat down beside her, her mother looked at her with no recognition at all. "Hello," Margaret said politely, the way you'd greet a stranger. "Hi, Mom. It's Lena." "Lena." Margaret tested the name, found no connection to it. "That's a pretty name. Are you a nurse?" "No, I'm your daughter." "Oh." Margaret smiled, confused but trying to be pleasant. "I have a daughter named Lena, and another one named Sarah. They're both such good girls, very smart. Sarah wants to be a lawyer." The present tense broke Lena's heart. In her mother's deteriorating mind, Sarah was still alive, still full of dreams and future. The tragedy had been erased along with everything else, leaving Margaret in a world where both her daughters were safe and whole. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe forgetting was the only way to survive certain kinds of pain. Lena spent 2 hours in the garden, talking to her mother about nothing, accepting that Margaret would never again recognize her, never again give advice or comfort, or the simple presence of someone who'd known her entire life. This was goodbye, even though her mother was still breathing. When visiting hours ended, Lena walked to her car and sat in the parking lot, staring at the steering wheel while tears she'd been holding back for 5 years finally broke free. She cried for Sarah, for her mother, for the girl she'd been before that terrible night on Keller Street. She cried for time lost to rage, for relationships she'd destroyed in pursuit of revenge, for every moment she'd chosen hate over healing. When the tears finally stopped, she felt scraped raw, but somehow lighter. As if crying had released a pressure she hadn't known she was carrying, her phone rang. "Adrian." "How's your mother?" he asked without preamble. "Dying, slowly but inevitably." Lena's voice was hoarse from crying. "She doesn't remember me anymore." "I'm sorry." "Are you? You barely know me. We've only been working together for a few weeks." "Long enough to recognize grief when I see it. Long enough to know you're at a crossroads." Adrian paused. "Helen tells me you haven't been to your apartment in 2 days. Where are you staying?" "The office. The couch in my workspace converts to a bed." "Stop that. Go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow we have the formal council meeting to ratify Victor's removal and discuss organizational restructuring. I need you clear-headed." "Why?" "I'm just an intelligence analyst. Whatever you decide about leadership doesn't affect me." Actually, it does. I'm offering you Victor's position." Lena's breath caught. "What?" "Head of operations. You'd oversee field activities, coordinate with our various divisions, serve as my second in command. It's a significant promotion, and it comes with resources, authority, and the ability to shape how this organization functions." "Adrian, I've been here less than a month. I don't have the experience or the loyalty of the people I'd be commanding." "You have something better. You have perspective. You've seen what happens when someone in that position goes rogue, prioritizes ego over effectiveness. You won't make Victor's mistakes because you've lived with the consequences of them." Adrian's voice was persuasive, almost gentle. "And the people will follow you because I'm telling them to. My authority still means something in this organization. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow's meeting, but Lena..." He paused. "This isn't just about filling a vacancy. It's about deciding if you want to be part of building something different, or if you want to walk away and pretend these weeks never happened." After he hung up, Lena sat in the parking lot as evening fell, turning the offer over in her mind. Head of operations meant power, influence, the ability to actually change how Adrian's empire functioned. It meant staying in the darkness, yes, but maybe being the person who kept others from stumbling in it. It also meant accepting that she was fundamentally changed, that the girl who'd walked into that cafe 4 weeks ago was gone just as surely as Sarah was gone, as her mother's memories were gone. Some deaths didn't involve stopped hearts. Some were transformations you didn't recognize until they were complete. Lena drove to her apartment, the expensive one Adrian had provided, so different from the studio she'd lived in before, and found a package waiting by her door. Inside was the journal Victor had given her, along with a note in different handwriting. "Found this in Victor's office when we were clearing it out. Thought you might want it back. Helen." Lena carried the journal inside, made coffee she didn't drink, and opened to the first page where she'd written that single sentence weeks ago. "I don't know who the monster is anymore." Now, with everything that had happened, she wrote a response below it. Maybe we're all monsters. Maybe we're all victims. Maybe the only thing that matters is what we do with the damage. She filled the next 10 pages with everything she'd been holding inside. Her rage and grief and confusion, her guilt over Sarah's death, her complicated feelings about Adrian and the organization she'd infiltrated to destroy and might now help lead. She wrote until her hand cramped and her coffee went cold and the first light of dawn started bleeding through the windows. When she finally stopped, she felt empty in a way that wasn't painful, just quiet, ready to be filled with something new. The council meeting was set for 10 a.m. in the main conference hall, a space that could hold 50 people but today held only 20, the senior members of Adrian's organization, the ones who made real decisions about strategy and direction. Lena arrived early, dressed in one of the professional suits that had appeared in her closet, courtesy of Helen's efficiency. She looked like someone who belonged in a position of power, and maybe that was the first step to actually becoming that person. Adrian was already there, reviewing documents with Helen. When he saw Lena, he gestured her over. "Have you made your decision?" he asked. "I want to see how the meeting goes first. Hear what the council says about Victor's removal and what comes next." "Fair enough." Adrian handed her a folder. "These are the charges being filed against Victor. 24 counts of criminally negligent homicide, multiple counts of embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison." Lena opened the folder and saw Sarah's name listed among the victims. Sarah Marie Carter, 23 years old, law student, survived by her mother Margaret and sister Lena. Survived by. As if Lena had survived, when really she'd spent 5 years dying in slow motion. "His daughter called me this morning," Adrian said quietly. "Rachel, his ex-wife. She wanted to know if the money I'd promised to protect would still be available." "What did you tell her?" "That Victor's crimes were his own. His family stays safe and provided for, just like I promised." Adrian met her eyes. "Revenge doesn't extend to children." The council members began filing in, taking their seats around the massive table. They were a diverse group, former military officers, ex-corporate executives, people who'd risen through various criminal enterprises to reach positions of influence in Adrian's empire. They looked at Lena with curiosity and calculation, clearly wondering who this new person was and why she was sitting at Adrian's right hand. At exactly 10 a.m., Adrian called the meeting to order. "Gentlemen and ladies, thank you for coming on short notice. As you all know by now, Victor Hale has been removed from his position and turned over to law enforcement. What you may not know is the full scope of his betrayal." For the next hour, Adrian laid out everything: the embezzlement, the Keller Street massacre, the years of lies and cover-ups. He played the audio recordings, showed the financial evidence, brought in Davis to give his testimony again. By the time he finished, the room was silent with shock and anger. "Victor Hale broke the most fundamental rules of this organization," Adrian said. "He stole from us. He lied to us. And worst of all, he made us complicit in the murder of innocent civilians. That kind of betrayal cannot be tolerated. I'm formally asking the council to ratify his permanent removal and to support the criminal charges being filed against him." One by one, the council members voted. The result was unanimous. "Good," Adrian said when the vote concluded. "Now we address the question of succession. Victor's position needs to be filled, and I'm nominating someone I believe has the skills, judgment, and integrity to do it correctly." He gestured to Lena, and she felt 20 pairs of eyes lock onto her with varying degrees of skepticism. Lena Carter has been with us only a short time, but she's already proven her value. She uncovered Victor's embezzlement. She helped gather the evidence that brought him down. And most importantly, Adrian's voice softened slightly, she understands the human cost of our decisions. Her sister was one of Victor's victims. She's lived with that loss for 5 years, and it's given her a perspective we desperately need. A man at the far end of the table spoke up. "With all respect, boss, she's an outsider. How do we know we can trust her?" "You trust her because I trust her," Adrian said flatly. "And if that's not good enough, remember that she had every reason to want me dead and chose to work with me instead. That kind of pragmatism is rare." Another council member, a woman in her 60s with platinum hair and hard eyes, leaned forward. "What's your vision, Miss Carter? If we put you in Victor's position, what would you do differently?" It was a test, and Lena knew it. Every person in this room was evaluating whether she was a liability or an asset. She stood up, meeting their skeptical gazes directly. "I'd stop pretending we're not criminals," she said, and saw several people's eyebrows rise. Victor's biggest mistake wasn't just the Keller Street raid. It was lying about it, covering it up, making everyone complicit in his deception. If we're going to operate in the shadows, we need to at least be honest with each other about what that means. "And what does it mean?" the platinum-haired woman asked. "It means we have power, and power comes with responsibility. We can't prevent all collateral damage, but we can minimize it. We can choose our battles carefully. We can make sure that when civilians get hurt, it's because there was no other option, not because someone was too arrogant to verify their intelligence." Lena looked around the table. "I'm not going to stand here and promise to make this organization moral, but I can promise to make it more careful, more strategic, less likely to create situations where innocent people pay for our mistakes." The room was quiet for a moment. Then the man who'd questioned her trust nodded slowly. "That's a better answer than I expected," he said. Adrian called for a vote on Lena's appointment. It wasn't unanimous this time. 3 members abstained, clearly wanting to see her prove herself before committing fully. But 17 voted yes, which was enough. "Welcome to the leadership, Miss Carter," Adrian said, and extended his hand across the table. Lena shook it, feeling the weight of what she'd just accepted settle onto her shoulders. She was head of operations for a criminal empire. She'd gone from hunting Adrian Voss to becoming his second-in-command in less than 5 weeks. Sarah would have been horrified. Or maybe Sarah would have understood that sometimes the only way to change a system was from inside it. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, discussing organizational restructuring, security protocols, and the various operations that needed new oversight now that Victor was gone. Lena listened and learned, occasionally asking questions that seemed to impress the council members with their strategic thinking. By the time it ended, she felt exhausted and energized in equal measure. This was real. This was happening. She was stepping into a role that would define the rest of her life. Adrian found her afterward in the empty conference room, gathering her notes. "You did well," he said. "Better than well. You earned their respect, which is harder than earning their fear. I'm still not sure this is the right choice." "Then don't think of it as a choice. Think of it as an experiment. Stay for 6 months, see if you can make a difference. If you hate it, walk away. I won't stop you." "You'd really let me leave? Knowing everything I know about your organization?" "I'd really let you leave, because keeping people who don't want to be here is how you create enemies like Victor." Adrian's expression was serious. "I need loyalty, Lena, but I need it to be freely given, not extracted through threats." She believed him, which was perhaps the strangest part of this whole impossible situation. Adrian Voss, crime lord and manipulator, was the most honest person she'd encountered in years. "6 months," she said. "I'll give you 6 months. That's all I ask." 3 weeks later, Lena stood in a courtroom watching Victor Hale plead guilty to 24 counts of criminally negligent homicide. The families of his victims packed the gallery, and when the judge read Sarah's name among the dead, Lena felt her mother's hand squeeze hers. Margaret was having a good day. One of the last, according to Dr. Patel. She'd woken up that morning knowing who Lena was, understanding why they were going to court, remembering Sarah well enough to grieve. It was a gift, these moments of clarity before the final darkness. "Sarah would be proud of you," Margaret whispered as Victor was led away in chains. "You got justice for her." "I'm trying to do more than that, Mom. I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." "That's good, baby. That's what Sarah would have wanted. Not revenge, but prevention." Margaret's eyes were bright with tears and temporary understanding. "Promise me you won't lose yourself in this work. Promise me you'll still have a life outside the darkness." "I promise." It was a promise she intended to keep, even though she had no idea how. After the sentencing, Lena drove her mother back to Meadowbrook, helped her settle into the new memory care unit, and said goodbye knowing it might be the last time her mother recognized her. Margaret held her hand at the door, looked at her with perfect clarity, and said something that would echo in Lena's mind for years. "You're stronger than you know, stronger than Sarah, stronger than me. You survived when we didn't. Make sure that means something." 2 months later, on a cold January morning, Margaret Carter passed away peacefully in her sleep. Lena got the call at 4 a.m. while reviewing intelligence reports in her office, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Both parents gone now, Sarah gone. Every person who'd known her as a child erased from the world, leaving her untethered and alone. She called Adrian without thinking, and he answered immediately despite the hour. "My mother died," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "I'm sending Marcus to pick you up. You shouldn't be alone." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Nobody's fine when they lose their last parent. Let me help." An hour later, Lena was sitting in Adrian's private residence for the first time. A penthouse apartment she hadn't known existed, decorated with actual warmth rather than his office's calculated elegance. He'd made coffee, offered food she couldn't eat, and then simply sat with her while she cried. "I don't have anyone left," she said when the tears finally stopped. "Everyone who knew me before is gone." "That's not true. You have the people you choose as family now." Adrian handed her a tissue. "Helen thinks of you as a younger sister, even if she'd never say it out loud. Marcus told me yesterday that driving you to visit your mother was his favorite assignment because you always thanked him. You've built connections here, Lena. You just haven't noticed because you were still seeing yourself as temporary." "Maybe I am temporary." "You're not. You're thinking 3 moves ahead in every operation, asking questions that make the council members reconsider their assumptions, building a reputation as someone who's tough but fair. You're becoming exactly what this organization needs." Lena looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time since that night in the cafe when he'd offered her an impossible choice. He'd saved Sarah, even if only for a moment. He'd given Lena the tools to find justice. He'd been honest when everyone else lied. And now he was sitting with her in the middle of the night while she grieved, offering comfort without demanding anything in return. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Really, why does it matter to you if I stay or go, if I'm okay, or falling apart?" Adrian was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice held a vulnerability she'd never heard before. "Because you remind me that there's still something worth protecting in this world. You could have become bitter and destroyed. Could have let Sarah's death turn you into something monstrous. Instead, you turned it into purpose. You're building meaning from tragedy, and that's—" He stopped, searching for words. "That's rare. Worth preserving. I'm not special, Adrian. I'm just doing what I have to do to survive." "We're all just surviving, but you're doing it with grace, and that makes you extraordinary." The words hung between them, charged with something Lena didn't want to examine too closely. Because Adrian was her boss, her partner in the organization, the man who'd created the circumstances that brought her here. Getting involved with him would be complicated at best, catastrophic at worst. But when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. They sat like that until dawn broke over the city, neither speaking, just existing in the shared space of grief and understanding. When Lena finally went home, she felt less alone than she had in 5 years. Margaret's funeral was small, just Lena, a few nurses from Meadowbrook, and Adrian, who attended without being asked. They buried her next to Sarah in the city cemetery, and the priest said words about peace and reunion that Lena wanted to believe. Standing between the 2 graves, looking at her sister's and mother's names carved in stone, Lena made a decision. She would stay with Adrian's organization, not for 6 months, but indefinitely. She would use her position to make it better, cleaner, more careful about the lives it touched. She would honor Sarah's dream of helping people, just in a way her sister never could have imagined. And she would build a life that meant something, that transformed the darkness instead of just enduring it. "I'm staying," she told Adrian as they walked back to the car. "Permanently, if the offer's still open." "It's always been open. But I'm glad you've decided." Adrian looked at her with something that might have been relief. "We'll do good work together, Lena. Maybe even great work. We'll do necessary work. That's all I can promise." "That's enough." 6 months after Victor's sentencing, Lena stood in the main conference room presenting her first major strategic initiative to the council. She'd spent weeks developing it. A comprehensive program to minimize civilian casualties in all operations, verify intelligence before acting, and provide compensation to families affected by their activities. "This will cost us," one council member objected. "Millions in payouts, reduced operational flexibility." "It will also cost us less in law enforcement pressure and public backlash," Lena countered. Victor's Keller Street massacre brought down heat that we're still dealing with. If we're proactive about reducing collateral damage, we stay below the radar and maintain operational security. The council debated for an hour before voting to approve her initiative. It was unanimous this time. After the meeting, Adrian found her in her office, looking out at the city she'd learned to see with different eyes. "You're changing things," he said. "Not overnight, not dramatically, but genuinely. The organization is different because you're in it. It's still a criminal empire, but it's a better one. That matters." Lena turned to face him, and something in his expression made her breath catch. He was looking at her not as an employee or a partner, but as something more complicated. "Adrian, I know. It's inappropriate, unprofessional, probably a terrible idea." He moved closer, his wheelchair quiet on the office floor. "But somewhere between that cafe and today, I stopped seeing you as an asset to manage and started seeing you as someone I don't want to lose. I'm not going anywhere. I know. Which makes this harder because I can't use the excuse that we don't have time." He reached for her hand. "Lena, I'm asking if you'd consider—" "Yes," she interrupted, because she'd been feeling the same pull for months and fighting it seemed exhausting. "Whatever you're about to ask, yes." Adrian smiled, and it transformed his face from austere to genuinely warm. "You don't even know what I was going to say." "Doesn't matter. I trust you." And she did, she realized. Somewhere in the past 7 months, trust had grown from the ashes of revenge and grief. He pulled her down, and when their lips met, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been, like finding something she hadn't known she was searching for. They stayed like that for a long moment, the crime lord and the girl who'd infiltrated his empire to destroy him, now partners in every sense of the word. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be violence, still be difficult choices, still be nights when Lena wondered if Sarah would recognize the person she'd become. But it was real. It was honest. And it was hers. A year after Victor's sentencing, Lena received a letter from him in prison. She almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. "Dear Miss Carter," it read in Victor's precise handwriting. "I know I have no right to contact you, and I'll understand if you destroy this letter without reading it, but I wanted you to know that I think about your sister every day. Not just Sarah, but all 24 people who died because of my arrogance. I can't undo what I did. I can't bring them back or make their families whole. All I can do is serve my time and hope that somehow, somewhere, it means something. You've done more with your grief than I ever did with mine. You've turned pain into purpose. That's the difference between us. I wish I'd learned that lesson before it was too late. I hope you find peace, Miss Carter. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Victor Hale." Lena read the letter twice, then filed it away with the other documents from that terrible time. She didn't forgive Victor. Forgiveness wasn't hers to give, but she understood him a little better, understood that people could be destroyed by their own choices and still wish they'd chosen differently. She wrote back a single sentence. "Sarah wanted to help people. I'm doing that in her name. That's all the peace I need." But 2 years after joining Adrian's organization, Lena stood in a new apartment, one she'd chosen herself this time, in a building with morning light and a view of the park where she ran every morning. Adrian had helped her move in, and now they sat on the floor surrounded by unpacked boxes, eating takeout and talking about the future. "The council wants to make you my official co-leader," Adrian said. "Equal authority, equal decision-making power. They think the organization runs better with both of us at the helm. What do you think?" "I think they're right. I built an empire, but you're teaching it to have a conscience. Together, we're actually creating something sustainable." Lena looked around at the apartment, at the life she'd built from the ruins of the old one. She had work that mattered, people who depended on her, a relationship that challenged and supported her in equal measure. She visited Sarah's grave every week and told her sister about the good they were doing, the lives they were protecting, the way grief had transformed into something that resembled hope. "Co-leaders," she said. "Equal partners." "In everything," Adrian confirmed. He leaned in to kiss her, and Lena felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years, genuine happiness. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something strong enough to balance it. That night, lying in Adrian's arms in her new apartment, Lena thought about the girl who'd stood outside that cafe in the rain, broken and consumed by rage. That girl was gone, transformed by time and choice and the uncomfortable truth that redemption was complicated and messy and never looked the way you expected. Sarah was still dead. Margaret was still gone. Victor was still in prison. None of that would change. But Lena was alive. Really alive, for the first time since that terrible night on Keller Street. And she was using that life to make sure fewer families had to experience the kind of loss that had nearly destroyed her. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she started hunting Adrian Voss. It was better, more real, more human. From ashes and betrayal and blood, she and Adrian had forged something rare in their world: trust, purpose, and the kind of love that was born from understanding exactly how dark the world could be and choosing to bring light to it anyway. Outside, the city lights flickered on as evening fell, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Somewhere in that vast sprawl, people were making choices that would define their futures, living and dying and struggling to survive. Lena couldn't save them all, couldn't prevent every tragedy or heal every wound, but she could try. With Adrian beside her, with Sarah's memory guiding her, with the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the only way to honor the dead was to keep living, keep fighting, keep choosing hope over hate. "Tell me what you're thinking," Adrian murmured against her hair. "I'm thinking about new beginnings," Lena said, "about how sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better." And have we built something better? We're building it every day, every choice, every time we choose to be better than we were. Adrian pulled her closer, and they lay together in the darkness, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other, two criminals trying to carve out something good from a life defined by shadows. It was imperfect and complicated and probably doomed in a dozen different ways. But it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. In the distance, sirens wailed, the eternal soundtrack of a city that never slept, never stopped, never ran out of people who needed saving. Lena listened to them fade into the night and felt Sarah's presence like a whisper against her skin. "I did it," she said to the memory of her sister. "I found justice, found purpose, found a way to keep living." The silence that answered was peaceful, accepting. Sarah was gone, but her dream, her hope that someone would fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves, lived on in the work Lena did every day. That was legacy. That was how you honored the dead. By living so well, so fully, so purposefully, that their absence became a kind of presence, a guiding light that showed you the way forward, even in the deepest darkness. Lena fell asleep in Adrian's arms, dreaming of a future where the empire they built together actually made the world a little bit safer, a little bit better, a little bit more just. It was an impossible dream. But then again, so was a girl consumed by revenge learning to love again. And she'd done that. So maybe impossible was just another word for difficult. And Lena Carter had never been afraid of difficult. Not anymore. Not ever again. The end.